Hello and welcome back to the Nikon Studio here at the NAB Show 2019 in Las Vegas, Nevada at the Convention Center. My name is Mike Corrado with Nikon. I'm your host here for today. We've got 5 great presentations about to come up, talking with some incredible cinematographers, filmmakers, and journalists today. Before we get started, we are here at the show for the 4 days to debut some really cool NIKKOR lenses like the 58mm 0.95 NOC lens. We've got Z series mirrorless cameras. We've got all kinds of technologies here with MRMC, with camera pods and robots and automated technologies that are tracking my limbs right now. So it's a really exciting time at this show. In fact, we even have a camera pod set up with a Z6 up in the rafters, and our first guest, Alex, we're looking up there right now. So welcome to the show and welcome back. So any of the programs we ran yesterday and anything we're about to broadcast live now, we are going to post on Nikon Live and Nikon's YouTube page, so you can go back and watch them as many times as you want if you missed any part of them or missed a presenter. Our first guest today is Alex Gorosh. I've seen Alex's work and it is stunning. Alex is a director, commercial documentary director. He has done a bit of work for Nikon with our P1000 camera, directed a beautiful piece, and he's worked recently with the Nikon Z6, and we're going to talk about that a little bit today. So before we get started, for anybody that may not know you, talk a little bit about yourself, tell us about what your background is and how you got into this business of photography, filmmaking, video, and the directing role that you play now.
Sure. Well, first of all, thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
You're welcome.
So I started out as a bit of a one-man band show. My first job after college was for Outward Bound, which is a national outdoor leadership school. Mm-hmm. They take kids and adults into the backcountry. So essentially I was lugging my camera equipment up mountains, into kayaks, on dog sleds, snowboarding, however you could imagine backcountry travel to go. That was the first, I'd say, 2 years of my career. Over the years, I've made over 80 pieces of content for them. I also work for people that aren't Outward Bound. Mm-hmm. I moved out to Los Angeles, and I continued some of the one-man band stuff and then elevated myself into more of just a commercial director. And
bigger productions, bigger footprint.
Yeah, but even when I do those jobs, you know, it's hard for me sometimes to not have a camera around my neck, mm-hmm. you know, whether or not it's, you know, sometimes it's just for fun, sometimes it's mm-hmm. more B-roll.
Right.
But yeah, I love that interactive side of it. Most of my work is, I'd say, you know, either doc-style commercials or commercial-style docs. Mm-hmm. So, and I think it's a really good time for documentaries in general. And
how did you know this was going to be a career for you? Was it very early on? Did you pick up a camera?
Very early. I was in elementary school and middle school. I was lucky enough, my parents had a camera I was allowed to play with, and basically as soon as I was old enough to start holding it, I was making skate videos, and we were like doing terrible things in our local mall. I mean, stuff that like later we'd watch, you know, Tom Green and Jackass, and like I wouldn't want to, we weren't quite as creative as they were, at least like maybe not as bold.
Right.
But we still tried our best to be total idiots in front of people. And
then at a certain point you decided this is going to be a career for you.
At some point I stopped being such an idiot on camera mm-hmm. and started working more behind the camera. And yeah, and then I moved to LA. I knew, yeah, from very early on that I wanted to work in something in film. Right. And I studied film and writing, and I moved to LA, and I've been lucky enough to stay busy ever since. I've traveled to over 20 countries for work and most of the states, and I'd say I'm very fortunate to be able to work on projects that not only get to take me to cool places, but generally they're for organizations or people that I care about.
Right.
It's sort of the corner of the market that I'm trying to focus on. And so, yeah, I've been very fortunate so far in that regard.
What was your first connection with Nikon and that first call from Nikon like? What project did they call you to work on?
It was the infamous Bill Giordano called me up. So they had seen a film I had made about viewing the moon. So it was called A New View of the Moon. It's actually been nominated for a Webby right now.
Awesome.
If anyone wants to go to my
I know you've won several other
Instagram,
awards. Congratulations.
Thank you. And vote for us. We'd really appreciate it. Send me a note. I'll send you a thank you card or something. And he had seen that film, and essentially there was a very basic premise for that. We took a telescope to different places around Los Angeles to let them look at the moon.
Right.
And it was actually my buddy Wiley's idea. And when he told me the idea, I thought, you know, that's a very simple concept. I don't know why that would be exciting. And then after the first night of shooting, seeing everyone's just awe, you know, they turn into a little kid again when they look at this thing.
Real genuine reaction.
Yeah, so it was such a successful night. We got so many great reactions. We did that 12 or 14 more times.
Right.
It was a lot of shoot days. And then we put it all together. So Bill had reached out about a project for the P1000, and this camera, for anyone who's not familiar, has the craziest zoom you'll ever see.
Right, 3,000 millimeters,
3,000
millimeters,
yeah.
right.
So we wanted to essentially let the camera speak for itself. And so we picked, you know, similar structure. We picked different spots around Los Angeles where we knew people would be willing to talk to these weirdos with a camera. And we let them take a look, and the results, you know, like I said, the camera speaks for itself. You know, the people's reactions were totally genuine. We just let them take a look.
And we're going to see a clip of that later on.
We will, yeah.
So talk to me. You've got this background in travel. How important is it for you to have a small package of gear to work with, a smaller, lighter package of gear to work with?
Super important. First of all, because you know you have to schlep it places.
Right.
So it's whether you know it's that backcountry travel that I do, you know, half the time, but then even on other jobs, like, you know, in the documentary world, there's a barrier between you and the subject whenever there's a camera pointed at them.
Right.
I don't care who you are. As soon as you're on camera, you act a little bit different. I'm acting
absolutely
different
believe.
now
I can imagine a big cine
like
camera,
yeah.
you know, Hollywood type camera. People freeze, right?
They freeze, and
that's a great point.
It's not impossible to get over, but it takes some time. And a lot of times, especially with branded documentaries or more in the commercial world, you don't have the luxury of spending a week with somebody to get them to relax in front of the camera.
Right. I can imagine how intimidating that is.
So when you have these tiny mirrorless cameras and you just put them there, I can tell people are just more at ease immediately. And that's why it's a very exciting time, I'd say, for documentaries because of that, because you can get this amazing image quality from such a small camera, and it's really, you know, if you show me this, you know, these products when I was a kid and explain to me what they could do, I wouldn't believe you. I'd say that's impossible. It's too small.
Come a long way, right? From the very first video product that you picked up.
Yeah, no, for sure.
You were able to put the Z6 in your hands.
I was.
And put it to test with a project called Tokyo.
It's
video
called,
Tokyo.
we shot it in Tokyo. It's a project called Tomorrowland. It's about the future of cities for an organization called the Nantucket Project,
right.
which is similar to like TED, although they don't like to hear that. But essentially, we went to Tokyo and we wanted to see what they're doing right in Tokyo. That we can use as an example for what the future of cities would be like.
Right.
So more and more people are moving to cities. Cities are getting bigger and bigger in terms of population. Tokyo is already the most populous city on Earth, so we went to see why is it so efficient, how are they able to be so, you know, it's a very functional city, even though they have 35 million people.
It's big, lots of movement, lots of action. I've been there several times, and it's one of my favorite places on the planet.
So it's been, it was an amazing place to shoot, and it's funny. A friend of mine said, like, "Oh, you're making a film about the future of cities. What, are you just showing time lapses of intersections the whole time?" And I was like, "Yeah, pretty much."
Talk to me a little bit about the preparation, though. How do you prepare for a gig like that?
Sure. So you do a lot of research. So I had to essentially learn about every sector of what the city's doing beforehand, and that's just in terms of the content of the documentary. This is a 10-minute long short doc.
Right.
So that was probably the most time-consuming part, but then beyond that, it's figuring out where your visuals are going to come from. If it's this one intersection that you want, what are the different angles that you want of it? And then we did a lot of hyperlapses as well. And we did, we tried to, wherever we went, capture things in a way that was a little bit different than what you would expect, so that it had that futuristic edge. Right. Part of that meant shooting a lot at night, because for me, just things that are lit up right at night, which a lot of things in Tokyo are, that just looks more futuristic. So that was a big part of the game plan. But yeah, in terms of the preparation, you figure out what the outline is, you find your people to interview, and then you find your B-roll visuals that you want to fill up the time with.
and travel and packing must have been a lot easier carrying a Z system as opposed to some of the bigger gear you may work with.
Yeah, for sure. We actually went back and forth a lot about, well, we don't want to talk about other cameras on the show, but bigger camera systems, they, what you might gain from slightly more dynamic range or whatever it might be, you lose something in terms of not only just having the smaller camera in terms of that dock feel that I was talking about, but also is about just being quick.
Right.
You can throw one of these on a little stabilizer and get 10 shots by the time it takes you to set up another camera and get a couple shots. So
and I think it's obvious and smart to understand that you're going to work with bigger Hollywood-style cameras. I mean, that's what you do. And that this camera, the Z6 or Z7, has a place. What kind of lenses did you pack when you went?
So at that time, I only had the 24 to 70. The camera was on consignment.
The F4, right?
Yeah. But it was great. I mean, it was tack sharp, all the way zoomed in, all the way zoomed out. And what we were really impressed with the camera was just first of all, the color science of Nikon, I think, is just hands down better than the other mirrorless cameras that are out there right now.
Right.
It just looks more natural and real. But then, we went into one place, for example, in terms of like these futuristic imagery. It's called Team Labs. They had a digital art exhibit called Borderless. And if you could imagine, it's a giant warehouse, projectors everywhere. They had something like 500 computers running like thousands of projectors. I don't even know. But super cool. It's all interactive. You could touch it and things would move. But it's pretty dark. It's basically pitch black until you're up against the projection.
You're able to test the ISO.
Yeah, so we had to bump the ISO way up, and that was kind of the first time that we put that ISO to the test in the field, and was amazed. I mean, it still looked great. The black still looked black. You didn't get a lot of noise. It looked fabulous.
It's amazing what happens inside the housing of this camera, because you brought up color science, and there was a point in time in my career I actually sat next to a color scientist at Nikon, and I'm blown away by, I couldn't even figure out how to design an on-off switch, let alone all of these things that go into the camera in the way of hardware and software. So that's great. I understand you have some clips, some of your favorite clips from
we
Tokyo
have a quick
that
reel.
we can punch through. I guess punch that button and we'll, let's see what you've done. That's beautiful. How did you get that perspective from the train? How did you get that shot from the train?
So I'd seen that in another montage of sort of the best sites around Tokyo, and knew that I wanted something similar. I tried to do it. We had to figure out how to do it at night, but essentially once we got to the train station, you had to go to the last train on the last stop on this particular train that didn't have any drivers, so it actually was pretty futuristic on its own. But we kind of had to wait there for the train to come and then rush in so we could be right in the front seat. Took it all the way to the end of the line, and then it turns around and goes back, so we had to kind of like race to the other end of the train to get the same angle on the way back, so we had 2 shots at it.
So did you bring other hardware, handling hardware for the camera? Any kind of stabilizers? Did you at all rely on the VR built into the camera? Or did you use some of the typical tricks and techniques that you use?
Yeah, we had a gimbal stabilizer we brought with us, and yeah, we definitely used, even this thing handheld with the internal stabilization is pretty amazing. So, especially with I don't have them right now, but I got the steadiest hands in the biz. You wouldn't believe it. No, but with those little...
That's why we hire you.
Yeah. Those little gimbal stabilizers are are amazing in what they can do for such a small piece of equipment.
Right.
It changes everything.
And you can breathe a little bit more, right? You go with a lighter package, you can actually move around. And that does affect you over a day when you're shooting for 8, 9, 10 hours, I would say.
For sure. A few years ago, I was using the Ronin, and even that, it's like, after I had a project where I was using it for about a week straight, and I like tore something in my shoulder just from like the slow, steady holding this thing. So anything that's lighter and still gets the quality I want is great for me. Yeah.
So let's transition over into see much further. The project we were talking about earlier about the P1000. And Bill Giordano gives you a call. He'd seen this telescope video. Of course, Bill runs around the office and he shows us all because he was fascinated by that as we were prepping to introduce the P1000. And the P-Series Coolpixes have had really amazing telephotos, and we took it that much further to 3,000 millimeters. So Bill approaches you about this project. Where does your creative mind go? He says, I kind of like that telescope thing, but how do you differentiate yourself from that project and then something else that you're doing with the camera?
Yes. So first of all, I'll say that when I was trying to think of ideas for this, the biggest question is, what are you going to be zooming into? You want to show off the zoom. What are you going to be zooming into? I live in Los Angeles. Didn't seem like there were that many things we could zoom into that didn't feel like a little creepy. You don't want to see some other building over there.
I think you handle it because I did see the clips, and I love the way you actually execute it, and people are going to get to see that. But go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah. So from there, we picked, wildlife's a great thing to zoom into, and then of course the moon is always like, and so we knew that there was going to be a twofold wow factor when we were taking the camera out. Was first of all, just the ability of the zoom, and we mentioned in the film, it's letting you see something that you can't with the naked eye. So whether it's a telescope or whether it's this insane zoom, you're looking at something, and all of a sudden you're almost transported to this place that's could be a mile away, but you're so close when you're looking at it, you feel like you're there, and that is just a feeling that when you watch it, it's like you can't help but get excited, and that's what you see in the film. So that's why we didn't want to do anything too crazy. Like I said, we wanted the camera to speak for itself. Right. We essentially, used Wiley as the host to set up the premise and to talk about the bigger picture of things. But it was great, and similar to our telescope film, you can see how everyone had the same reaction, and you could see how an experience like this camera, like looking at the moon, is a universal thing that we can all appreciate.
Right. So we're going to show another clip. Set up the next clip. What are we going to see?
Yeah, let's do it. So this is the very first minute of that film. And I was going to talk about the very opening shot is one where Wiley is talking direct to camera from about half a mile away. And logistically, it was not easy to pull off because... But
I love the way you did it because it really caught my attention right away.
Great. Appreciate it. Well, let's watch it and then we'll talk more.
Sometimes an innovation comes along that allows you to see things like you never have before. When you see something that's beyond the reach of the eye, suddenly brought very close and suddenly made real, you can't help but be filled with a certain delight and wonder. I think a camera like this allows us to do that in a way that I haven't seen another zoom ever do.
And what I loved about that is you kind of did the reverse of what most people would do. Instead of zooming into the subject to reveal, you actually pulled out and showed you what you don't see from that 3,000 millimeters.
Yeah, because once you're at that wide angle, like you can't even see him down there. He's too far away. So what was funny about that shot was, and looking back on it, of course we should have just had some powerful walkie-talkies or something, but we didn't that day. So he ran off to go do it, and I sent him with our audio guy. And I figured, the plan was to use cell phones, and then, of course, there weren't cell phone service where he was standing. But we still had a system. He had his line that he would deliver, and then I knew he was finished with his line when he would turn around. So I was just sitting there staring at the camera, and then whenever he would turn, I would start to zoom out.
Right.
And it happened to work out well. So
now talk a little bit about the people. My mic is out, but we're going to keep going. Here we go. Little interference here in a convention center with all this going on, so it's not unlikely to have stuff happen like that. You're working with people now. People just average people walking by, right? And like you said, you don't want to intimidate them with big cameras. So how do you approach them? How do you get them to come up and look? How do you create that rapport real quick? It's like you said before, you have a quick few seconds to get them interested. But the reactions were so natural. We're going to see that, but talk about that just a little bit.
Yeah, the vibe on set for me is an extremely important thing. You know, that's something that whenever I am talking to someone that we're potentially going to bring onto a project, like I just need to know that they're not going to make things more stressful, that they're going to be just calm and cool and just friendly. So we, especially on that project, we found a bunch of just like very friendly, outgoing production staff who were able to help find people. And we also strategically picked places where there would be tourists, there would be some, you know, maybe aspiring actors, we didn't know, but folks that were not going to be afraid to just have an experience like this. And, you know, some people, especially in LA or any big city, they're going to see a camera and they're going to stay far away from it. But other folks are going to wander up and come close. And there was actually a funny moment where we're on the Santa Monica boardwalk, and I have, you know, we were shooting this all on the D850, and there was a 70 to 200 millimeter lens on the camera. So we were zoomed in, you know, nice bokeh in the background. This is at night. And these little high school kids came up to me, and they looked at the screen, and they were like, "What are you working on?" And we were about to start shooting, so I didn't have a ton of time, but I was like, "Oh, you know, it's this thing for Nikon." And he looks at the screen, he goes, "Oh, cool, you got portrait mode on there?" And I was like, no, we don't. This is what they're faking. And I couldn't really explain. I wanted to go into a whole lecture, but I didn't have time to explain it to him. But I was like, no, that's not it.
So you've got a clip that includes some of the people's reactions. So talk about that a little bit. And then I know you feel like maybe there's some repetition in the reaction, right? But that's intentional.
Yeah, so that's what we found was the most powerful thing, is that no matter who you are, where you're from, people just react the same way. And whether that means saying the same words or just having the same look on their face, we wanted to put those all together. And I think it says something, you know, more than just about this camera. It says something about humanity, that, you know, when you have an experience like this, when you're able to see things that you normally aren't, it affects you, and we're all the same in that way. That's
the best approach, too, because it's kind of like in rock and roll photography. I do a lot of rock and roll, and everybody shoots the action on the stage, but what happens behind the scenes is most important. So it's the things that you just don't generally get to see. So that reveal, to me, is what's so exciting about this. But let's show the next clip, and we can talk about that.
Sounds good.
You want to check out this camera? Sure. This is the zoom button up here. This is the little trigger up here. That's how you zoom. And you guys can just zoom in, and you'll see what you'll see.
Oh my gosh. Oh my god.
Oh my god.
Oh my god, okay.
That is insane. That is insane.
That is super crazy.
That's crazy. That's freaking crazy, man.
That's amazing.
Isn't that crazy?
It is.
It's absolutely amazing. The clarity of the image is incredible.
It's so clear. Like, I'm amazed.
Holy cow.
This is cool.
This is really cool.
That's so cool. Isn't that amazing?
Wow.
So I'm assuming the, hey, that camera's got programmed didn't make the cut. Were there any other scenes that didn't make the cut?
Well, yeah, we in editing, to put something like this together, you compile it all. Like, these are all the awesomes. These are all the, oh my gods. These are all, and a lot of people asked us, like, how much does this thing cost? And we didn't end up putting that in there because didn't want it to feel too much like a, you know, infomercial
and again,
or anything. But
you cannot fake that natural reaction.
Yeah.
And I think that's the kind of thing that gets everybody in the belly, is when they see that, and you know instantly that's not staged.
Right.
Nobody is being prompted to say something. They see that, and they saw that camera zoom in, and I think that's the most beautiful thing.
And especially, like, if anyone did have a reaction that didn't feel as authentic as we want, like, we're not going to put it in the cut because we want it to seem like, you know, these are like involuntary reactions. These are people being like, whoa, like, and that's what we were looking for.
So talk to me a little bit about, if anyone's tuning in that wants to do what you do, that wants to get into directing or camera operating, what advice do you have to get them just going and started?
First of all, do it all the time. I was that weirdo in high school that always had a camera on my side. And you know, some of the other speakers that talked about, you need something that differentiates yourself. So
Creating a style, right?
yeah, and it doesn't need to be, you know, blue hair or, you know, I'm the guy that, you know, always does this one camera transition or whatever it is. But figure out what it is that, I think what it is that you're passionate about, and then find a way that, you know, to keep doing it. So I always felt like I would, you know, my plan was to move to LA and keep doing what I wanted to do, and then if it ever felt like it wasn't working out, I would maybe look at other things. But the point was I wasn't, I didn't really want to find an assistant's job and work my way up that way. I wanted to keep doing what I wanted to do.
You wanted to control. And
yeah, so even though I was making, you know, in the very beginning, I was making projects for basically no money, barely enough to pay
seems to be a
rent.
common theme, and many of the filmmakers and cinematographers I've talked to, directors.
I was just glad to be doing it. You know, I was like, I'm out here, you know, shooting or directing or, you know, making this content, and even though I knew then that it wasn't the big time, like, it's just every time you do something, you're learning, you're getting better, and it'll lead to bigger things, hopefully.
Do you run your own marketing? Do you do your own business? I mean, you know, obviously Nikon called you because they saw this piece. Where do they see this piece, and how do you drive that business for yourself?
Yeah, I have a... So that project where they found me through is on our YouTube channel called To Scale, which we made a film a few years ago that did really well, and through that we've gained a small YouTube audience. But that's definitely one way. And other than that, I try to put cool pictures on Instagram, and now I've teamed up with, you know, more, you know, commercial style production companies. And am doing more of, you know, work in that world. But I definitely, you know, I think the personal brand is important. I think that there's a lot of pressure on folks to, you know, build up your following to the point where, you know, I'm not sure. I think a lot of young people now might think that that's the only way that they can be successful.
Right.
And I wouldn't necessarily agree with that. You know, at some point I decided, like, I'm not going to be that guy that puts out a YouTube video every week.
Right.
And I am glad I didn't start doing that. I mean,
again, everybody
kudos
has
to everybody who does that. Yeah, it's
Sure.
amazing. But
and it's got to work for you.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Because, I mean, a lot of people would hire people that are experts in social to make sure that stuff happens because it's so difficult for you to do, you know, on a regular basis. But
right. I mean, that on our YouTube channel, like, we put out a video like once a year because, first of all, we're busy and we have to do this in between our paid projects. But also, we want it to be so good. Like, we tweak the edit forever. We're adding graphics. Like, we don't want to do something quick. We want to make it amazing and, like, really make somebody's day when they watch it.
Well, trust me, what I'm seeing from you is amazing. I have a secret that I know you're working on something for us, but we cannot reveal that now. So good luck on that project. I wish I could have been a part of it. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you guys for tuning in. If you're here at the booth, thank you guys for watching. We have Tom Antos coming up next, the filmmaker, who's going to talk about small footprint production as well, and his experiences with the Nikon Z6. So thank you for tuning in. We're going to take a 15-minute break, and we'll come back with Tom.
I've been working with Nikon super telephotos for the last 10 years. They're essential for the work I do. When they reached out about their new 500mm f/5.6 prime lens, I did not expect this. An ultralight and compact super telephoto. My job takes me to some pretty remote places, and the weight of my backpack is always something I have to take into consideration. But I'll choose heavy over lack of performance any day, so I really wanted to see what this lens could do. I couldn't think of a better testing ground for performance than photographing birds. Photographing animals is a lot like photographing people. Body language and gesture are essential. I'm not interested in photographing them perched. In flight is where the action is. But it's a patience game. And when the moment presents itself, the last thing you want to do is miss the shot. This lens is ridiculously easy to handhold. And Nikon's technology makes it not only ultra light, but razor sharp. If I needed an extra focal length boost, the ability to switch to DX mode in my Nikon D850 changes my focal length to roughly 750mm without decreasing the speed of the lens. The last thing I want to worry about is durability. The dust and drip resistant build keeps me confident that the lens will hold up in hard outdoor conditions. The autofocus locked on with precision, and the VR allowed me to easily shoot in low light. This lens nailed it in every category. It's something I want in my backpack, anywhere I go.
像感って何だと思いますか？
For me, sharpness is all about realism.
解像感は質感をリアルに再現するもので、デジタルではなく優れた光学で得られます。
They're so precise and sharp. It's like opening a window and seeing pure reality.
ニッコールレンズは色にじみなく髪の毛一本一本をシャープに改造します。
With this lens, it was striking how clean my images were.
映像の画面全体に今までにないリアルさと奥行きを感じることができます。
It delivers a clarity that captures the world like the way we see it with our naked eye.
それが私たちの解像感です。
This lens is small and light, and it allows me to get close and intimate to the people I'm photographing. And in a way, it almost allows me to become invisible. My name is Amy Vitale. I'm here in Cape Town, South Africa, shooting this incredible city that is so diverse in its landscape and also the richness of culture. I need my gear to be fast and sharp. Frankly, it just has to handle a lot of abuse because I'm in these extreme landscapes, for example, in the middle of a sandstorm. I've been really impressed because this lens is tack sharp in every situation and at every focal range, whether 24 to 70, also when it's wide open, 2.8 sharp. If I can only have one lens, this is it for me because it can handle a whole range of situations and it's light and sharp, durable, and fast.
And welcome to the Nikon Convention Center in Las Vegas. And you are going to hear my mic every once in a while pop in and out because of all the RF interference here. So I apologize for that if you're tuning in. Maybe you can read lips, I don't know. But we'll try to go back and repeat if we hear the mics go off. We've had some great education over the last day, and we continued on today with 5 more programs. We've already gotten through one with Alex Gorosh. And any of these programs that we're broadcasting will, and we are live, so I get another microphone. Is this one on? All right. So we have some great education here, and our next presenter or guest is Tom Antos. And Tom is going to talk about going small with big production. Small, I assume, meaning the size of the camera. And the package that you run with as a cinematographer. But you're a director, cinematographer, and you're a visual effects specialist as well. Kind of all rolled into one.
That was my background,
So talk a little bit about your background. But I love to dig a lot deeper into when you got started, when you first picked up a camera, when did the light bulb go on that this is going to be something you do as your career and passion for pretty much the rest of your world?
Do you want the full story or the...
good enough story.
Okay. I mean, I guess with like most people, I started as a kid. Kind of, it was, you know, you watch a movie, you get impressed by what you see, and I guess the thing for me about films was that you kind of get to escape to another world, right? Yeah, and then as a creative person, I guess I wanted to recreate a lot of those worlds. And so I remember, I mean, as a kid, I used to just like make little puppets and things from films that I watched. But then I remember the biggest impact was when I watched Lion King. I watched Lion King. I knew nothing about animation, but I used to love to draw. And I watched Lion King, and I was like, wow, how the hell did they do this film? And a story that kind of really engaged me. So I started kind of following up, learning about animation, and that's actually how I got into the film industry. So my first official job in the industry was as an animator. It was a 3D animator, but I did some 2D animation afterwards too. I worked on commercials. I worked on a whole bunch of things, like music videos, films, and stuff as an animator. And my first film I worked on was actually with Whoopi Goldberg, Robin Williams. It was like a big budget production. So
that's a nice set of people to work with.
Yeah. So it was inspiring.
So as you were growing and learning, who inspired you? Because one of the things I've seen in your work, you have a beautiful website with a training center, which I promise I'm going to go back and start looking because I'm going to delve into video a bit more. I'm a still photographer. Who inspired you on your way up, and who do you look towards for that kind of inspiration to drive you as a cinematographer?
I think Spielberg. I just, as a kid, I loved a lot of his films. James Cameron. I like the more mainstream kind of cinema. But then later on, once I got into film industry, I think a lot of European cinematographers. So yeah, different people. You know, it's kind of a collage of different filmmakers. But yeah,
I'm a visual kind of guy, so I know you got some movie clips to show, some video clips to show. Why don't we show everybody a little bit of behind the scenes of what you do?
Okay. Clips of some of the productions that I worked on, and as you can see, you know, going all the way from like these little, you know, mirrorless cameras, and then sometimes you have to go with the bigger kind of a cinema camera. It really just depends on the project and what are the tools. I always kind of I'm not set on using one set of cameras just because it's considered a professional, you know, tool. I'll pick whatever is the best tool for that job. So.
And that's a common thing here. I mean, as a filmmaker, you have to be prepared to work with whatever's, you know, kind of thrown your way in the way of production. So you have to be versatile, I would think.
Yeah, and you know, this is one of the kits that I've been using lately because of the fact that it's so mobile. So.
And what does that do for you? I mean, talk about the types of cameras that you work with and how this plays into you as a filmmaker. I mean, the way you work as a filmmaker.
When I started, we were still shooting on film. So shooting on a 35mm, you know, film camera with a 400-foot mag, it's not something easy. Like especially if we want to get like handheld shots and things like that. Not to mention that like it's funny because sometimes like now I see young filmmakers complain, about like, oh, I've got this camera, but the battery life is, it's really bad. It only lasts for 1 hour or something.
Right.
Whereas on a film camera, you shoot 10 minutes, you get stuff, change out the mag, all that stuff. So I mean,
there's a trade-off with the technology.
Yeah, but I mean, now I think we're living in the best time for filmmakers. And so a lot of the productions at the beginning, when I was kind of switching into digital, you kind of just accepted that the cameras are going to be big and bulky. And I remember like the first cinema digital cameras, I mean, you were tethered with cables and all that stuff. It wasn't easy to work with. So as long as the camera was on sticks, you're fine.
Right.
But if you wanted to ever move the camera, or like, we were on set and you wanted to change your mind, it would get difficult because, like on any schedule, like when you're shooting a film, you have usually a tight schedule, and you have to kind of make sure that you get all the setups done in that day. And so if like last minute the director tells you, hey, you know what, I like this angle, but I'd love to move the camera left to right.
Right.
With a big camera setup, that's that creates a lot of problems, right?
So talk to me a little bit about the first experiences you had. How did you come to pick up the Nikon Z6? And what were some of your first impressions and experiences with the camera? I
mean, I'm always on the lookout for like new technology. And I think mirrorless cameras in general kind of are changing the game. What was the big difference with this is it's the first full frame mirrorless camera that shoots, that has proper video tools for like, whether you want to judge your exposure or things like that, but also it records in a better codec than like, basically H.264 or whatever the codecs are that most cameras use. You can record in ProRes. You can record even, well, in the future, soon enough, hopefully you'll be able to record in RAW.
And talk about that a little bit, because that's the hot ticket here for us at this show. We made the announcement. We haven't made the final delivery date yet on that firmware, but how important is to have the RAW format?
I think it changes everything, because up to this point, a lot of these smaller cameras, they were great for kind of small little projects, but when you're doing something big, you need that RAW format. When you go into post-production and you need to have the freedom to whether sometimes even just recover the information in the highlights or the shadows. But a lot of times it's not even about that. I mean, like, if I do a good job as a cinematographer and I expose properly, you don't have to worry about maybe recovering information, but you still want to be able to treat the footage. So whether you're really pushing or pulling the colors or the gamma in the image, if you're doing this with like a codec that wasn't meant for that, the image just falls apart. And that's why, because at the end of the day, all films are pretty much going to end up being distributed, like whether it's Blu-ray or whatever. They're heavily compressed. But you want to start off with the most information that you can capture. RAW is, kind of changes everything, right? You're capturing everything. And so to be able to capture RAW on a small little format like this, in full frame, where you have, out-of-focus capability, where you can just run and gun, it's a game changer. Right?
So what other technologies have helped change the game? And do you think it's moving in the right direction? I mean,
it is, yeah. I mean, I think sometimes it's maybe for filmmakers it's kind of hard to catch up with certain things. You really, you come to events like here, and you want to kind of try all that technology. But I think for me, and I would think most cinematographers would agree with that, going smaller is better, because the smaller the camera you have, basically it just allows you to put it into more places, set up like for example, like as you can see up here, we have it here on the Moza Air 2 gimbal,
right?
And with this setup, you can get kind of like smooth dolly shots, you can get really fast kind of flying shots, all that stuff, but it doesn't take long to set up. And also another big thing is one person can operate this,
right?
Which is not something that like a lot of these setups that like if you see again, like this stuff we were shooting, and the weather was chaotic, and it was in New York, and to be able to just grab this camera, and in this case I actually had the larger recorder,
right?
It was the full size 7-inch Atomos recorder, and you still with that setup I was able to, like I said, go and get the shots that I needed, whether we had permits or not, and also whether the weather was cooperating, because that's another nice thing that this camera has, is that it's weather sealed, the body, and if you have the proper lenses, and so I was a little bit worried. I mean, you're always worried when you have a new camera to kind of just throw it out in the bad weather, but we did it, and it worked.
One of the things as a manufacturer and moving into mirrorless, we didn't skimp there. I mean, all of the sealing and protection experience we've had with the D-series cameras, the D850s, the D5s, the higher-end cameras, that's all built into the mirrorless.
And I loved shooting with the D850. I think, you know, for stills, it's an amazing camera. And for video, I liked it too. I just felt like this was like the perfect upgrade because it's more video, centric when it comes to the features and stuff.
Right, and the things I appreciate, and again, I don't do nearly as much video as you, or even close, but having 5-stop VR built in, as beautiful and as nice as the Moses and how it works, but full frame video, 4K, slow motion, time code. All these things built in. Did you work at all with the autofocus system?
I did, yeah. So like, and especially when you're on a gimbal, because if you're hand holding the camera, I do like to pull focus myself, and in that case, I would use like the older NIKKOR lenses, which personally I just love that look. But when you're on a gimbal, you don't want to touch the camera, obviously. So having autofocus that is reliable with the face recognition, it made a big difference. So,
right, so there's face recognition now. We've also made the announcement, although we haven't set the delivery date yet, on a firmware update to do eye activation AF as well.
Going to improve it.
I think that's one of the things in shooting video with Z-series cameras that I found, even in still photography, that tracking subjects is pretty phenomenal at that point. So talk a little bit more about when you're choosing gear. How do you choose gear for different projects?
I mean, for me, I always, I always first start, I want the best quality, obviously. So whether it's being able to shoot RAW, if I can, or shooting, ProRes, you don't want to go below that, at least like 10-bit. But then you're really looking at the schedule, the mobility, right, of the gear that you're going to take, and the size of the crew. I think a lot of times people forget that just because your budget allows you to rent, a big full-size cinema camera, you might not have in the budget the right size crew and also the time to work with that camera. Because again, to set up a big cinema camera, it's again, it just takes a lot of time, and to operate it, that's another big thing. Because you're going to need, with a full-size gimbal and a full-size cinema camera, usually you're going to need one person holding that, maybe another person operating, like where it's pointing, all that stuff on a remote, another person pulling focus. Then you got to, because of that, you got to add, the wireless follow focus system, wireless video system, have a whole video village, and by the time you set up all that stuff,
Hollywood, right?
Yeah,
I probably worked on over 20 commercials, TV commercials with Nikon, and I've seen it both ways. The Hollywood way, where you go into a studio set. And you've got 40 people on the crew, and
they're all that's all they're doing,
actors and directors and producers and ADs and
you have a whole team,
ADs and props and wardrobe and the whole thing. And then on the flip side, we've actually been able to go with a smaller package and produce TV commercials within a day. With cameras like the Z6 or D850 or D5. So
like in the case of this, what I love is that not only the setup is quick, but I could just myself hold the camera and pull the focus using the lever here, and I mean, it's just one person can operate it. You can get moving shots, and you can record in high quality. So
as a filmmaker throughout your career, take us a little bit on that journey. And again, we're here to educate and inspire. How do we do that? By talking about maybe some of the things that you made in the way of mistakes, or what are the common mistakes you've seen other people make as filmmakers?
It's going to maybe sound funny, but in a way, concentrating on the gear too much. I think you kind of have to, and what I mean by that is a lot of filmmakers maybe, like they'll look at what's the latest film that was, that they aspire to make or imitate, and they look at what the gear they use, and whatever the size of the camera is or things like that, and they decide that they cannot do the same quality of work unless they have that, that big professional rig, right? And I would say now, because of technology enabling people to shoot, first of all, being able to get smaller cameras that are a lot more affordable, I think it's see what's the best kit package that you can afford, get it, and then once you have the gear, forget about it.
Right.
Kind of thing. Learn to use it, obviously, learn all that thing, but just concentrate on what you're filming, not so much about the gear.
How do you stay creative in all this too?
Yeah, again, know what the gear is, and after that, kind of forget about the gear.
Put it aside, right?
Yeah, put it aside.
Use your brain.
And just, a lot of it, I think, is preparation. I mean, I come from the background of doing animation,
right.
And then later on, I was a visual effects supervisor. So everything that I do, at least, is I love to be prepared. So I do storyboards for everything.
So of all of those things, the animation part, visual effects, the cinematographer part, or the directing, which of those three things do you like the most?
I think right now cinematography. Yeah, yeah. I mean, I love directing. I direct too, but when you're directing, you're kind of thinking about everything, the performances, all these things. Whereas a cinematographer, and I love to take photography, take photos in my spare time. So I like the fact that as a cinematographer, I can kind of just concentrate on creating beautiful images, and I can kind of forget about the rest. Visual effects, I mean, I love doing it, but it's just not fun sitting in front of the computer for months.
I can appreciate that. I'd rather be shooting pictures and stills than sitting behind the desk editing them as a photographer. You have more clips if you want to run through. Let's talk about those.
So this is actually another quick little thing we did handheld on the Z6. And it's just like a quick scene from this project we're shooting. And
where are we here?
This is in New York, in Brooklyn. And what was great about this was, again, the in-body image stabilization that the Z6 has. It just worked out great. I mean, in this case, I didn't even need a tripod, gimbal, nothing, and you can get nice and stable shots. So
right.
And also another thing I love is the low light capability.
Right.
I think it's that's something that I think now as filmmakers, it's kind of something that you need. And actually, that's something that a lot of big production cameras don't have.
Right.
Like if you're going to go for the full-size cinema cameras, a lot of filmmakers who are up and coming, they think that you're going to get you're getting the best of everything. But in reality, this camera has way better low-light capability than any cinema camera, like a full-size cinema camera on the market right now.
So you were able to press that low-light ISO.
Yeah.
How far did you go?
In that case, I think we didn't go higher than 10,000 ISO. Yeah.
10,000
but it's still,
not bad, right?
On a cinema camera, I would never shoot higher than 800. So
right.
Yeah. So
yeah, and again, that's where the technology has come along in such a big way.
Yeah.
Because we've heard that commonly, with cinematographers using this, that they were pushing ISOs harder than they ever have before and blown away. Yeah. That even at common 800 ISO or 1,000 ISO. It's like what they used to shoot before in 64 ISO.
Yeah.
So having that ability and that confidence in low light is pretty big to you as a cinematographer, I would think.
Yeah. Yeah.
I want to shift gears because I really do think this is important to talk a little bit about your business and how you run your business. And again, I want to cite that everybody tuning in should really look at your website. Because the training tips you give, we even have somebody here in the audience came up and said they follow you religiously and they've learned quite a bit. Talk a little bit about the business, how you run it. Talk about this training site and how you put that together in social. How do you get the word out about Tom Antos?
I fell into it kind of by accident. I mean, social media is a big thing, and for me, it started with YouTube. And it literally was, again, by accident. I was uploading videos, like in the early days of YouTube, uploading videos to YouTube for clients to preview. And I had no idea that other people could actually see them. And so I started getting comments. And I guess the thing was because I would upload like one version of the edit, the next version, or then the color graded version. And what happened is people were like, oh, I like how it's, the progression. What did you do to go from this version to this version? And I started getting all these comments, and I saw that there was a lot of people who were, just learning. Some people who were maybe just casually kind of passing by, maybe thinking about getting into filmmaking, cinematography, or photography. And they had all these questions. And then, I just started answering them. It all started kind of in the comment section until it got to a point where was getting so many questions of so many things that I just started doing like training videos and things like that, and live seminars. I also do filmmaking seminars. So, yeah, and so it's kind of just grew from there, slowly, but yeah, I started releasing stuff on my website, kind of compiling it all there, and a lot of stuff that I teach, because I think it's one of the most important aspects if you want to have good cinematography is lighting. So a lot of my online filmmaking stuff, tutorials, is about lighting and basically how with lighting you can shape cinematography, the look of your projects, all that stuff.
Talk a little bit about how you do that. A little insight to how you may light a set or light a situation.
I mean, always know, again, be prepared. So whether it's storyboards or I do kind of like this look Bible. So I collect examples of what's the kind of final look that I want for the project when it comes to the, just, like overall, whether it's, let's say, very kind of overexposed look or kind of, a little bit darker, what kind of color schemes you want, what kind of sets, things like that. Once you pick, obviously, the right locations, the right, you have the right props and the actors and everything, lighting can drastically change the way a set, or your scene looks. So I start always going, I'll start always setting up usually with the key light, but always referencing the, my lookbook, and always making sure that I go back to that, my storyboards, and that's, I don't know whether that's a necessary thing, but it helps me. I like to be prepared, so that's how I work. So yeah.
So what are the projects that you're working on now? What are you up to? And is there a bucket list thing, something that you're really looking to do at this point in time in your career?
There's a lot of projects I want to do, but at the moment, I'm like the most important for me is a personal film that I shot. So a film that I wrote, directed, and I didn't actually shoot it. I hired a cinematographer for that one, but it was a film we shot in South America. And it's going to be hopefully coming out in maybe 2 months. So we're going to do a release online and that kind of thing. And along with that is going to be a whole bunch of tutorials. And one of the reasons why I think it's going to be interesting is because for that project, we had the budget to go with the big cinema cameras and everything. But last minute, we decided to pull it and do everything on mirrorless cameras because it just allowed us more freedom. Yeah, we're filming in South America, in really just crazy locations, crazy weather. We're going like from very humid weather to very dry weather, and then part of the shoot was on little rickety boats in the middle of the Pacific, because the film is actually about sharks. It's called Shark Bait. Yeah.
That's great. So what a couple of months we have to wait for that?
Yeah, and then hopefully on my website I'm going to have the announcement and the little teaser and all that stuff.
So now you've added writer to your resume, so not only special effects and directing and cinematography, you've added filmmaker. How much do you involve yourself in the post-production?
Oh, that's if I'm the cinematographer, if the production allows me to, I love to color grade the footage. So, because just from some experiences I found sometimes you can shoot the greatest footage, and if somebody doesn't do a right job, pulling the colors, it can make your work look pretty bad.
It's a photographer's nightmare with editors. Sometimes you turn in and select. I've learned to not turn in anything I don't want used, because a lot of times your thought is not their thought in the way they see that being used, that image. So I can imagine it's the same thing. We talked a lot about different things you've done along the way, but if anyone's tuning in that wants to get into this, I'd love to ask this question of everybody is, what's the best advice that you'd have to give them to get started but keep going in this business, not burn out, because I can imagine with a lot of the physical time spent out in the field, the hours and hours of production. I can tell you I've worked on 18-hour days before, with lower budgets to try to get things done within a shorter period of time. But what's the best advice you can give to anyone tuning in?
I mean, in a way, just go out there and start filming, because I think, again, a lot of times filmmakers get kind of held back at the beginning because they're, a lot of excuses, basically. They have excuses of, I don't have the money, I don't have the time, I don't have the equipment. And I think now, with stuff like this, I mean, you buy the Filmmakers kit, and I mean, you got everything here pretty much that you need. And I think, like I said, get the gear, and then forget about it and just start shooting. The best way to learn, I mean, you can, watch my tutorials. You can. I
was going to say, that's where I'm going to go learn.
Yeah, I mean, you can do that, but you can read a whole bunch of books. But at the end of the day, if you don't apply what you learn there, it's never going to stick in your head. That's what I found with most people. And also at the end of the day, I mean, you want to have something good to show when you're real, right? So if you have good work that you show, that's how you're going to excel. You're going to get more work with other, filmmakers. You're going to collaborate. And so it really just starts with shooting anything. Like I tell people, like literally, you have a day off, and you're bored. You don't know what to do. Grab the camera and come up with something to film. You meet somebody, now online you can meet so many people on, on different filmmaking forums and things like that. Go meet up with filmmakers in your area and come up with a project, Maybe somebody else has an idea, but they don't have the equipment, or vice versa, or somebody has the lights and you have a camera. Collaborate and just shoot as much, because that's the best way you're going to learn. And also, that's the best way you're going to collaborate with people.
I think that's great advice because, again, when you don't have budgets, I mean, where do you find models? Where do you find the actors?
Yeah.
There's always somebody growing or trying to learn the business or get experience behind the camera when money's not on the line. And so it's the same thing. I photograph all my friends. People ask all the time, where do you get your portrait subjects? I photograph my friends, and I ask them to come back and do different things. And you create these networks and relationships of makeup artists and you know, behind-the-scenes prop people and people that are good with sets and things like that. So
and there's a lot of like
together.
I almost found like also that there's a lot of people like in front of the camera, you know, talent, whether it's dancers, like when we do music videos, or actors, you know, actresses. A lot of them who are also struggling, just like you, right? You know, as a filmmaker. And so if basically if you find and you connect with those people, they're gonna work on your project for free. You in return, you know, get some great footage hopefully for their reel. Help them, you know, they help you in return. And also, I think one of the best ways to make connections, I mean, you know, in the industry is by again collaborating with people. You can do that through film school, but even again, if you don't go to film school, just you know, just collaborate with anybody, because a lot of the people that I've worked with, even like up-and-coming filmmakers, I remember there was a filmmaker that contacted me a few years back, who just shot one short film, but I was just really impressed, and he's like, you know, I really love your work. Can you come help me shoot my next film? And I was like, okay, yeah, you know, send me the script. If I like it, I'll shoot it.
That's great.
And I remember I helped him with that project, and he's since then, I mean, had one success after another, and he's actually ended up hiring me for work.
Now, I don't want to put you on the spot, and I get this question a lot, and I know a lot of photographers are asked, what's your favorite photo of all time? And I know it's kind of hard to isolate one thing, but I actually do have favorite photos, but I break it down to genres of sports, my favorite portrait picture, and I use that to kind of push myself, to motivate myself to do it even better. What's my favorite drum shot, you know, drummer shot, my favorite sports action shot. Can you define one thing that you would tell everybody you want them to go see as your favorite moment in this business, your favorite production in this business?
Like you mean like a photo that inspired me, or
no, something you've done that you would want everybody to see that you're really proud of.
Okay.
Of course, the piece coming up that you're producing right now.
Oh yeah, so I would say maybe that's one interesting thing that you can see. There is a project that I shot. It's a music video. And there was a lot of stuff that we did with like candles and using the natural light. So a lot of low light shooting and stuff like that. And it's not online yet. So once it's online, then I can promote it. But that's I think something that I think it's just to show that basically we shot the whole thing without using any lights, other than natural light and candles. That's
very
that's
cool.
All we used, yeah.
Well, I would highly recommend that you tune in to and Google Tom Antos. When I Googled your name, a ton of things came up. Definitely go look at his website, his training site. Go to the YouTube channel. I mean, it's amazing stuff that you do, and thank you for sharing time with us here at the show. We are going to take another break, and we're going to come back with more live broadcasting here. We have here with us at the Nikon Studio, Pulitzer Prize-winning photographer and filmmaker Deanne Fitzmaurice. And she's going to talk to you about a Band on the Road project that she's been working on. We're going to talk to you about multimedia coming up next. So we're going to take about a 15-minute break. We thank you for tuning in, and we'll be back at you in about 15.
Sometimes an innovation comes along that allows you to see things like you never have before. When you see something that's beyond the reach of the eye, suddenly brought very close and suddenly made real, you can't help but be filled with a certain delight and wonder. I think a camera like this allows us to do that in a way that I haven't seen another zoom ever do. You want to check out this camera? Sure. This is the zoom button up here. This is the little trigger up here. That's how you zoom. And you guys can just zoom in and you'll see what you'll see.
Oh my gosh. Oh my god.
Oh my god.
Oh my god, okay.
That is insane. That is insane.
That is super crazy.
That's crazy. That's freaking crazy, man.
That's amazing.
Isn't that crazy?
It is.
It's absolutely amazing. The clarity of the image is incredible.
It's so clear. Like, I'm amazed.
Holy cow.
This is cool.
This is really cool.
That's so cool. Isn't that amazing? As a photographer, to have a single tool that can take you from a wide shot to something that is almost telescopic, it's a bit of a game changer in what you can do with a single camera. It's an emotional experience to be suddenly brought so close to something that was so out of reach in a way that shows you more detail than you thought was there. And that's an experience that will bring a smile to anyone's face.
That is unbelievable.
Now that is a zoom. Only Nikon could do this. Just incredible.
This is like one of those like planet Earth, like exactly.
I feel like David Attenborough.
So gorgeous too. This is so cool. That's so pretty. It's beautiful.
Beautiful.
Doesn't get much better than this.
You can see everything down there.
You can see everything.
You can see everything, literally.
I don't think any camera I've ever seen can do that.
I've never seen a camera like that.
I've never seen anything like this.
I've been working with Nikon super telephotos for the last 10 years. They're essential for the work I do. When they reached out about their new 500mm f/5.6 prime lens, I did not expect this. An ultralight and compact super telephoto. My job takes me to some pretty remote places, and the weight of my backpack is always something I have to take into consideration. But I'll choose heavy over lack of performance any day, so I really wanted to see what this lens could do. I couldn't think of a better testing ground for performance than photographing birds. Photographing animals is a lot like photographing people. Body language and gesture are essential. I'm not interested in photographing them perched. In flight is where the action is. But it's a patience game. And when the moment presents itself, the last thing you want to do is miss the shot. This lens is ridiculously easy to handhold. And Nikon's technology makes it not only ultra light, but razor sharp. If I needed an extra focal length boost, the ability to switch to DX mode in my Nikon D850 changes my focal length to roughly 750mm without decreasing the speed of the lens. The last thing I want to worry about is durability. The dust and drip resistant build keeps me confident that the lens will hold up in hard outdoor conditions. The autofocus locked on with precision, and the VR allowed me to easily shoot in low light. This lens nailed it in every category. It's something I want in my backpack, anywhere I go.
Welcome back to the Nikon Studio here at NAB, and we're going to continue on with Pulitzer Prize-winning filmmaker and photographer Deanne Fitzmaurice. But before we get going, I want to remind you, we are here showing so much technology at the NAB show. It's so exciting. We've got Nikon mirrorless cameras, the Z system. We have new NIKKOR lenses. We are here with MRMC and all kinds of technology and robots and Polycam chat. In fact, this broadcast is being transmitted through Polycam chat and limb technology that's actually studying my body right now to know where I'm moving to move the focus to the right point. It's so amazing what we're doing here and so much excitement at the show. And as we've been talking with cinematographers and filmmakers up to this point, we're going to shift gears a little bit to an incredible woman that I've known for many years, Deanne Fitzmaurice. She's a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist out of the West Coast. And she's also the co-founder of Think Tank Bags. And she's a Nikon ambassador for several years now. And I've admired the work that she's done because she's taught me so much in the way of relationships, networking, working with your subjects, and storytelling, because that's so critical to what we do. So welcome, Deanne, to our Nikon Live show. And we get to do this all the time together, and now we're going to have some fun on stage.
It's great. I love being on stage with you.
Talk to everybody, talk to me, talk to the audience about the work that you do, how you got started in your career as a photojournalist, because we're going to take that conversation into how all of a sudden video became a big part of your world, because I would think that early on it was nothing but still.
No. I started off as a staff photographer at the San Francisco Chronicle and worked there for many years, and there was a lot of evolution during the time I was there. You know, going from shooting film to really learning about storytelling. You know, as a general assignment photographer, I would be out shooting news and sports, entertainment, just a little bit of everything, and I love that. I love being out, kind of being on the pulse of what's happening. But over the course of the years, I really had to learn to tell a story. And sometimes that's in a still image, and you know, just using things like layers, light, moment, emotion to tell a story. And I also, you know, over the years have done photo essays where I'm building a story with multiple images, using sequencing and transitions, and you know, just trying to broaden it out and tell a deeper story, spending more time with a story, just to take it to the next level. So at the Chronicle, we started to start using video. And so, you know, all of a sudden this new technology came along. And in the beginning, I really resisted it because I didn't know what it could be.
Is that because the web started to become a bigger part of the way the newspaper would communicate with their customers, with their viewers?
Absolutely. And it just became a matter of, you know, what's the best way to tell a story? So I really resisted it at first, but the videos I was seeing, they weren't cinematic, what we were doing at the papers. They were really informational, and you know, it didn't really grab me as a visual storyteller. So after a while, I started to, you know, dive into it, and you know, I just thought, hey, if I can take my stories to the next level, there are certain stories that just need some depth and you know, just motion to help tell the story.
Well, you've obviously done a great job with still photographs telling that story too, because the moments that you capture, and I know as a still photographer as well, I've always been fascinated by the video side and motion, and how that motion can actually take a story to the next level, tell a different story with the audio, with music in the background, really grabbing emotion with the work that you do. So that's got to be very important.
Yeah, it is. You know, I still am a photographer, you know, from the heart and at the core. So I'm a photographer that's now doing motion and filmmaking.
Is it hard to do both at the same time? Or when you go out, do you go out with the notion about being a still photographer and only a still photographer, and then figuring out, well, I'll go back now tomorrow and do the video part of that?
You know, every project is different. Sometimes I'm just trying to do both at once, and it's really challenging to do that.
Because you're a one-woman band, right? I mean, you're one person out there most times.
A lot of times I am. With many projects, I'll collaborate with someone, but usually it's not more than 2 of us on set. So it's a very small footprint.
And speaking of small footprints, I mean, it's known, we've actually done this before, but we reached out to you when we were coming out with the Z7. And it was a huge secret, and we tried to keep it as confidential as we possibly could. But we wanted to come to you with a project, and we're going to see this Band on the Road project, which has been ongoing now for quite a few months, right?
Yeah, it all started with that phone call. It was in July when you called, and it was this very secretive thing.
I remember we were not dropping a lot of information, and what was the first thing I said? You're not allowed to ask questions?
And I proceeded to ask about 10 questions.
Can't ask that one. No. Yeah.
Yeah, but basically I had the opportunity to take the Z7 out into the field and create a project.
Right. And so you came to New York. What were your first impressions of the mirrorless?
Well, you know, I just picked it up and it felt right in my hands. It has the right balance and the right ergonomics. The grip just feels right in my hand. The menus and controls are all where I expect them to be.
Right.
You know, a lot of it is just an evolution of the 850 where, you know, I just know where to find things and it's very intuitive.
Right. And I know the electronic viewfinder, we've talked about this before, kind of changed the game for you because, you know, you're used to looking at the back of a screen or some kind of monitor, and now you could actually hold the camera like you have as a journalist for many years and go back to bracing that way. Talk about the viewfinder and the ability to use the VR.
Yeah, the viewfinder is so helpful for me, the EVF. When I had been doing videos with DSLR, you know, the 850, I would always use a loop on the back to focus.
Right.
So when I'm outdoors, you know, just it's challenging to focus that when you're out in bright sunlight. But now with the Z6, the Z7, you know, I'll be framing it, looking through the LCD, and then when I want to just fine-tune that focus, you know, bring it up to my eye, and it's so bright and so clear that I can focus so much easier.
Yeah, I found it to be more stable that way, so hand-holding the camera the right way, I mean, unless you're going for that kind of motion effect, which is really great. But, you know, let's talk about the story that you were going to go after, but how it quickly transitioned into something else. Now, I'll cut to the chase. We asked you to be, you know, a still photographer here, but there was a point in time where we said, well, wait a minute, Deanne does a lot of multimedia pieces. We really want her to push the video on that. So I called you, and it was what? It was a surreptitious moment because you were about to do what? You're about to call me.
It was unbelievable, yeah. It's seared in my memory. I was in a hotel room in Seattle working on this project, and for the last day working on this project, I had been thinking, you know, this really is a video project. It's not a stills project. But, you know, I had agreed with Mike that I would do stills.
Yeah, I was going to say, you responded yes very quickly. Let's do video instead.
I know, I probably should have played hardball a little bit, right?
Yeah. But it was nice because you already started building some still photographs, but the video is what's going to help tell that story.
Right. But it was funny the way this whole story came about. So when you first called me and said, you know, here's this very secretive camera, you can't talk about it, can't show it.
Can't be seen in public with it.
Challenging.
Have to get an NDA signed with everybody that is in the room with you. Yeah.
It was challenging. But what I did is I came up with an idea for a project that I wanted to do, and it was about cowboys in Hawaii. And I was so excited about this project, and I was able to find the right story, you know, lots of phone calls, and I got the access that I wanted, and I was all set to go. And then at the last minute, it fell apart.
And that's not uncommon as a journalist. You work really hard to try to create something, and doors start to open, they squeak open, you get a little crack of light coming through, and maybe it opens up a little wire, and then all of a sudden it closes, and like, you're done, you can't do this.
It's so true. It happens a lot. And, you know, you just have to learn to roll with it and not freak out and just figure out, okay, how am I going to solve this problem? So I was freaking out a little bit, though, really. And I was thinking, okay, now what am I going to do? I have to come up with a project for the Z7. And I was talking to a friend of mine, Lisa Fraser, and she says, hey, listen, you know, I know this band, Ron Artis. I've known them from Hawaii from a long time when Ron was still a kid. And their music is incredible, and I think they'd be a great story.
So you shifted from one story to this music story and Band on the Road, which we're going to talk about.
But it wasn't quite that fast because I was saying, oh, geez, I don't know. I really want to do this cowboy story. And
I could imagine the cowboys, horses, the whole thing. Yep.
Yeah, I had no idea what this story could be. But you know, she said, hey, you know, as a matter of fact, this band is coming to town. They're going to be playing in town. Why don't you just come see them? And I said, oh, I can't. I'm out of town. But my husband, Kurt, went. And so he went and saw them. I call up the next day and I say, hey, Kurt, how was that show anyways? And he just couldn't stop talking about how great this band was. He said they're extraordinary. Their music is great. He said not only that, they're great people. And they're so great that I brought them all home.
So
he said they're all staying here now. They're on the couch, in the guest room, sleeping bags.
And as people will see, these guys are somewhat gypsies. I mean, they're on the road all the time. They're sleeping in a van sometimes or a small hotel. But I know you have some stills that you want to show. Maybe just let's start to visually introduce this project and what you're doing here. What's your thought process?
Okay, so here I am. You know, I'm still thinking that this is a stills project. But, you know, I just kind of went on the road with them. Lisa and I said, okay, let's go do this. And Lisa pretty much worked as a producer. She was also doing second camera. And it's like, okay, let's just do this. So we're on airplanes, we're in cars, sometimes I'm jumping in the van with them. But this is Ron Artis, the leader of the band, with his wife, Yulia, and their two kids, Ida and Lily. And, you know, here they are up in Seattle. And I just love that he travels with his family. He's an amazing musician, and you'll hear some of their music coming up in some videos I'm going to show. His story is great. He grew up in a family of 12 kids. He's the oldest son, grew up in Hawaii, and they had a family band. And so now he has his own band.
Talk a little bit, as you're showing these pictures, how do you work your way in? How do you gain trust and confidence in them? Because now you're in their personal world at this point, and how do you get them to trust you?
Yeah. A big part of this story is that they trusted Lisa. They knew Lisa, because it always comes down to that trust.
So it's who they know first, and then you get introduced, you know, through your husband, and I bring him home, but, you know, because people just don't like cameras and video shot at them, right?
Exactly,
I mean, I guess he's a performer, so he's got to expect it, but...
There's always got to be a layer of trust there, and you know, and so once we start working with them, they already know Lisa. They already trust Lisa. So it was so much easier than if I just had to go in and build all this trust right away myself. So we already had a level of trust there. So we go on the road, and here we are in Santa Cruz. And Lily, she's 2 years old, and she is definitely going to be a drummer.
I love this picture. I mean, just a moment, right?
Yeah, and you know, her mom will let her come out for one song during the show.
With headphones on, as most parents do with kids at concert,
headphones, absolutely. But she's obsessed with drumming. And this is Ida, and she's helping her dad break down the set. This was also in Seattle.
And you can see it's almost like you're a fly, like they don't see you. You're a fly on the wall.
Yeah. And so that's what I try to do. I try to become invisible. So that's why this small footprint of the Z6, Z7 really helps. I can just, you know, I'm not carrying a lot of equipment. I don't have a big rig. So I'm able to just hopefully, you know, put people at ease and just become a fly on the wall. I just hope they forget about me. So this was along the way, you know, they had to stop and pick up some things at the store. But this is what their van looks like. You know, in the back, we've got, you know, like all these guitars, diapers, amps.
Right. They have packed that car well.
Yes, exactly. So they spend a lot of time on the road, and they're at the point where they're really starting to become recognized, and sometimes they'll have a show every night, and so they're just moving from one place to the other.
Right.
Here they are in the van. This is Stefan in the front. Now, Stefan, he's the drummer, and he's Ron's brother.
That's beautiful.
And Julia, she's always, working on, okay, where are we going to stay tonight?
This is life on the road. This is
It
where
is.
music really starts. Everybody thinks, big halls, big arenas, 40,000 people. This is where most performing artists are.
Absolutely.
Yep.
They believe in their music, and they're just doing what it takes to get out there and do the shows.
So as you're producing these stills, at what point do you start shooting video?
Early on, like on day 2, I'm thinking, even though I know it's a photography project.
Before we changed it, you started shooting video.
I started shooting video, and you know what? It was about the music, because they are about the music. And when you hear their music, there's no way you can tell their story without hearing the music. So I knew I needed the audio. I needed their music to be part of the story.
Yeah, let's roll through this and get to some of those clips.
Yeah. Okay, so this is the first film. So we'll go ahead and show this.
I believe we're all souls with a body, not bodies with a soul. And I ask myself, what is it we couldn't learn is just the soul?
I wrote this song about 7 years ago, about the love of my life.
Julia.
She's my everything.
I look at her and I just think,
The song I never thought I'd sing.
wow.
Smiles brighter than the sun above, and I'll always call her mine. This children's sword and country to live in her arms. Oh yes, I'm gone. Not like the wind, but I'm gone. Everyone say Julia, singing about my Julia. Oh yes, I'm in love.
Yeah, she's everything to me.
Now that's beautiful, and I've seen this before, and it still catches me every time, because it really does start to show people what happens on the road. That story, that it's not all glamorous, but at the same time, there's that family connection, and that's what I love. And we've talked about this time and time again about how you stay with stories, you don't let them go. Your Pulitzer Prize-winning story, you still know the young man that you won the Pulitzer for, right? And so this story is not over. Right? You produced a piece for us. We used it to help launch the Z7. But as a journalist now, you're not just cutting it off, because we're done working with you. You're going to keep going now. So you've been doing this now for several months.
Yeah, so this piece that you just saw, that's like a 90-second clip of a longer piece. And this was done by Lisa and myself. This is from, it was in the fall, going on the road, 3 different cities, or 3 different states. That was August and September. The next thing that happened is Ron contacts me and he says, hey, we're recording a new album. Do you want to come down to the studio?
That's a photographer's dream, to be on the behind-the-scenes part of the recording of an album.
It's incredible. I mean, this new album, I thought his last album, Soul Street, was powerful. This new one, it's just absolutely beautiful, filled with so much heart and soul.
Right.
He filmed it down at the Hurley Studios down in Southern California. and he filmed it. He's recording it there. So my husband, Kurt, and myself, we went down there.
You've now started to collaborate on this project together.
Yes.
Kurt has a journalistic background as well, and is into video as well.
Exactly, yeah. And Lisa would have been there too, except she was out of town. But so Kurt and I went down there, and we were pretty much using 3 cameras, Z6, Z7, 850, and it was really difficult being in the studio because you have to be so quiet because they're actually recording the album. So we had to be so quiet.
Yeah.
But you know, we just tried to capture the music and the story, and you know, the way we're capturing the audio, we're able to get some audio from the soundboard.
Right.
We actually have a on-camera mic, you know, just using external sources and, you know, pulling it all together and, you know, just figuring out how to tell this story. So that became an aspect of it, is in the studio.
So we're going to get to see some clips now of fresh stuff that you will incorporate into the original piece to create one piece, or are you going to do several different movies?
I'm not sure exactly where it's going to go, but right now what I do have are clips that I can show you from the work from the recording studio, but also they came to our home and stayed with us, and we have some work from there that we'll show.
That's outstanding. Again, and just another behind-the-scenes view. When you're going out, I can't imagine, if you're going small, you're not going to bring 10 lenses with you. What are the common focal lengths that you're working with? And as maybe we can run into the next clip and keep the audio going, what are you thinking as you're doing this? Talk a little bit behind it. This is kind of like the director's cut. You get to talk through it.
Okay. I'm oftentimes using the 105-1.4 because I'm crazy about that lens. It's my favorite.
Probably the favorite lens of a lot of portrait people.
Yes, yes. So I use that a lot. So a lot of this work was shot with the 105. So the 105, the 24-70, those are the 2 primary lenses. So I'm going to go ahead and roll on this.
Very cool.
Out of my turn, dear. Who are you telling me that I'm worth it? Now I've gone through a thing or two, but I would go through hell for you, 'cause I see heaven in your eyes, and no one sees me like you do. You like I do. Look at us, living life with our hearts out. Look at us, we don't fit to the world, dear. Now we'll go through a thing or two, but we'll hold on to what is true now. Reach heaven at your side. Loves me like you do. No one what you did.
So now I'm even more excited because, again, I've seen the original piece and I love seeing these clips. When the baby is up there with rice all over the body, how do you make that decision to keep that in motion or maybe shoot a journalistic still at that point? Or did you do both and decide that the video was the best way to go?
You know, this story, the way it's unfolding is so funny because, you know, they were coming to town to do a few gigs. And so Kurt invited them to stay with us, which was pretty
Honey,
fun.
again, I'm bringing them home.
Which was so much fun having them all there. So actually, we were just sitting around having dinner. And I look, and there's the baby, Lily, with rice all over her belly. And it's like, I have to go grab my camera.
That was priceless. That was a priceless moment. But I think what I love the most about that, too, is how you cut back and forth between Ron and the studio and then back to the family, because it really keeps you connected to that story about it's not just him sitting in a studio and glamorous. It's, you know, and baby in the sink. I mean, you know.
Exactly. Well,
these are priceless moments.
Well, Kurt did a great job editing these clips. And, I mean, it was challenging because, you know, we've got the studio footage, we've got the home footage, and, you know, just putting it all together. But I do love that, just the back and forth and, like, having the story take you all the way, the song take you all the way through the story.
Let's run the next clip. I know we got about 4 minutes left, and I...
Take love, throw it all away. They wanna break hearts and tell you what to think. But I'm here to say, dig a little deeper, won't you? Tell me what's on your mind, yeah. 'Cause it ain't about you, and it ain't about me. Hey now, woo, oh.
That's great, again. And I know you got one more clip, and I want to get it in before we end.
This is a rock and roll shuffle, y'all.
All right, so this gets better and better. You are producing some amazing stuff here. And when do you think this next version of this story will go live where people can see this?
You know, I'm not sure. It's one of these things.
It's still work in progress.
Yeah, it's so organic, you know. Lisa and I are going to continue following the story. Like, how can we not, right?
I think it's amazing what you do. You know, it's so amazing for me too, sitting up here with you, because you are definitely one of my mentors in communication and journalism and dealing with people, and I appreciate that. This work is stunning, so thank you for being with us today and giving up some good time to be here at the show. Again, if you're tuning in, if you missed any part of this segment with Deanne, we are going to publish this on Nikon Live and Nikon's YouTube page, so you can see it again as many times as you want, as well as the other programs. We're going to come back with the coolest of cool, another Nikon ambassador who is an amazing filmmaker. He started with music videos and he's expanding his career. His name is Chris Hershman. We'll be back in about 15 minutes. Thank you for tuning in.
Not just the photo qualities, but the video qualities as well, and how easy it is to switch in between both of them, because in my job it's so run and gun, I have to constantly change between the two. I've seen a lot of creators come to Dubai, and I wanted to come and test out the Z6 here. There's been so many different shooting scenarios in Dubai. I've been shooting in small seaplanes, hot air balloons, in the desert, a live performance. Without the Z6, it just wouldn't have been possible. The Z6's autofocus has been really good at tracking cars, wildlife, performers on stage, and I haven't missed a single shot. The Z6's ability of shooting in low light has really impressed me. On this shoot, I haven't used a single external light, and I wouldn't have been able to do that without the Z6. And it won't just help me, but it'll help anyone that shoots video solo. Features that I'd normally expect on a much bigger camera, like being able to shoot full HD, 120p, slow motion, being able to get very cinematic looking shots. When I use an external recorder on a Z6, I can shoot 10-bit N-Log. Having N-Log footage means that when it comes to post, I can bring out all the details, be it clouds in the sky, you know, reflections in the buildings, so I can get the look exactly as I want when it comes to the grade. Using the NIKKOR Z lenses from when I've been using autofocus on them, it's been amazing to see that there's absolutely no breathing whatsoever. The mount adapter has allowed me to use all my f-mount lenses as well, which has been amazing, and all my long zoom lenses for the wildlife, and it gives me all the access to all the tools I use on a day-to-day basis. Having used the Z6 in Dubai and seeing what it can do, I'm really excited to use it on my next job.
Sometimes an innovation comes along that allows you to see things like you never have before. When you see something that's beyond the reach of the eye, suddenly brought very close and suddenly made real, you can't help but be filled with a certain delight and wonder. I think a camera like this allows us to do that in a way that I haven't seen another zoom ever do. You want to check out this camera? Sure. This is the zoom button up here. This is the little trigger up here. That's how you zoom. And you guys can just zoom in and you'll see what you'll see.
Oh my gosh. Oh my god.
Oh my god.
Oh my god, okay.
That is insane. That is insane.
That is super crazy.
That's crazy. That's freaking crazy, man.
That's amazing.
Isn't that crazy?
It is.
It's absolutely amazing. The clarity of the image is incredible.
It's so clear. Like, I'm amazed.
Holy cow.
This is cool.
This is really cool.
That's so cool.
Isn't that amazing?
Wow.
As a photographer, to have a single tool that can take you from a wide shot to something that is almost telescopic, it's a bit of a game changer in what you can do with a single camera. It's an emotional experience to be suddenly brought so close to something that was so out of reach in a way that shows you more detail than you thought was there. And that's an experience that will bring a smile to anyone's face.
That is unbelievable.
Now that is a zoom. Only Nikon can do this. Just incredible.
This is like one of those planet Earth, Exactly.
I feel like David Attenborough.
So gorgeous too. This is so cool. That's so pretty. It's beautiful.
Beautiful.
Doesn't get much better than this.
You can see everything down there.
You can see everything. You can see everything, literally.
I don't think any camera I've ever seen can do that.
I've never seen a camera like that.
I've never seen anything like this.
We are back here at the Nikon Studio at NAB 2019 at the Las Vegas Convention Center, and we are going to continue on with our Nikon Live broadcast with the amazing Chris Hershman, Nikon ambassador. He's a filmmaker, and we're going to talk about his career. Chris, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Mike. Good to be here. Thanks for having me.
What do you think of all this great technology around us? We're looking at robots. We're looking at Z6 cameras. We're looking at all kinds of technology here. In fact, if you look up, we've got a camera that's tracking us up in the rafters.
Oh,
so
wow.
let's wave to the audience that's tuning in. Thank you guys for tuning in. We've had some really great segments up to this point, and if you missed any of them, we're posting them on Nikon Live and Nikon's YouTube page, so you can go back and watch them as many times as you want. But this is great because you make me cool just by being up here. I am not that cool. But I met Chris several years ago, and he has been working with Nikon. He became a Nikon ambassador. His filmmaking in the music business has been epic, but now you're growing a bit commercially. Talk a little bit about how you got started in video.
Yeah, you know, I think it was right at the beginning of the inception of video in Nikon DSLRs, and I was just trying to become a full-time photographer. The camera just happened to have video, and I tried it out and realized I was pretty good. I had a good eye at it, and immediately I was just drawn to the format of filmmaking. So I gathered some friends and some bands and just started, you know, being a musician myself, the first thing that I wanted to go film was music. And it was a perfect fit. I feel like I could speak that language. They feel comfortable, and it gets me access because I know that world a lot. So that's kind of where I took my career. And then it expanded a little more into commercial work and now into documentary work. And but that's kind of where I got my start.
So you're passionate of music. You worked in a big music store in Chicago?
Yeah, I used to work at Chicago Music Exchange. And then that's when I kind of learned the impact of video. I created a video for the company called 100 Riffs.
Right.
And it was a gentleman playing guitar. You know, he's the talent, but I was able to capture it. And he plays 100 guitar riffs chronologically in a row. And I think it has over 30-something million plays right now. That was one of my first videos.
That's epic. That's huge.
And then I met the Alabama Shakes.
Right.
They came through Chicago. They were playing a venue that only fit 200 people in that night. But I had the opportunity to film them for a blog at my buddy Steve Shirk's studios. And we created the official music video for Hold On, their song. And now that has over 30 million. So within like a year of span of like beginning my filmmaking career, I had these videos that were just going crazy. And I was like, I'm going to be a filmmaker. I love the impact of what this format does.
You just took the simple set of the store and turned it into a studio. And some of the work you did with just 1 or 2 cameras at times was pretty epic. But
yeah, thank you.
Obviously, we want to educate here. We want to talk a little bit about your experience with Nikon. When did you started filming, you know, with DSLRs or Nikon cameras?
Pardon me?
When did you start filming with them?
So again, at the very beginning, I think it was the D300S is the model that I had.
Right.
And that was maybe 7 years ago.
Yeah, it's quite a while ago. It was a D90 was our first entree in, and the D300S then incorporated video as well.
And I've been behind every Nikon that had video offerings ever since.
Right.
Which is why I'm excited to talk about the new mirrorless and the things we've been creating on that. Yeah.
So you talked about this. So the type of filmmaking you do takes you all the way now through commercial and documentary work. So the music grows into something a bit bigger, and your vision changes, your passion changes.
Yeah, you know, it's actually pretty funny because, you know, being a musician working in music retail doing video work. Funny enough, the company right behind our booth had asked me, can you come on and do commercial work where you're using live musicians?
That's Shure, right? We're allowed to say
microphones.
Shure.
Okay, thank you. I love Shure.
Yep.
So Shure asked me, can you make a series for our motive, which is capture musicians doing their thing, make sure the audio is live. That's what we want. And I just had that special, you know, set of skills to blend commercial with studio recording and performance. And after that, I was like, all right, commercial is great. And I was able to use all these cameras to grow my chops and you know, become a commercial filmmaker. And now we're moving on to documentary, which I really love. And I think I've got a clip And I'd like to show 2 clips if that's okay
Sure.
with you.
Grab that clicker and you run it, you control it, you are in charge.
Yeah, so the first clip is a recent documentary that I'm going to talk about here in the end of my program, but this is a preview of what we shot. I have 2 approaches when I'm creating videos. Does it call for an authentic approach? And if it does, let me just dive into putting you in the people's shoes. Let me get you as close as you can be to being there with not being there. And I have a very authentic approach that I really love to wrap emotion into real things. And then when it comes to music videos, I like to just throw that out the window and get as nuts and as crazy and creative as I possibly can. So I wanted to show real quick the contrast of using the same camera and having completely different looks and how over the years it's developed me into being a filmmaker who can do both. So here's the first one.
See, now that's awesome. That's really awesome.
Thank you.
We should say, who is the subject in this?
That's Mr. Joe McNally. He's a Nikon ambassador.
Yeah, and that's something that we worked with you on and we asked you to work on. It's something we're actually in the middle of this project right now.
Yeah, we're still working on it, but I have the pleasure of showing one of our final put-together episodes that went through a really great process that I want to talk about.
And that's at the end.
That's at the very end, so hang on to that.
Don't go away.
So the next bit I want to show you is the music video portion of my work. It looks completely different than what you just saw, but I want to show it as quick as possible next to that so you can see what these cameras can do. Yeah, so the point in that is I like to go surreal. I like to get crazy with it. I like to add as much bold color and test the cameras out and push them to their limits in the creative world of music video.
Clearly felt the difference between the Joe video and that is Emily Blue, right?
Yeah, there was Emily Blue, Company of Thieves, and those were shoots where I was like, well, when I started, I was just doing live music performances.
Right.
And so I still have that honest, authentic approach. I just moved it to documentary and commercial.
Right.
And now with musicians, I'm more interested in taking them down a different route, the creative element, because that's where I feel like I can have that fun and take the liberties to have sets and costume and bold colors. So yeah.
So you mentioned the D300S as being one of the first DSLRs you work with.
Yeah.
Let's fast forward now to the Z6. And
yes.
I know we commissioned you to do a project very much like the last segment with Deanne Fitzmaurice, where we said, here's a confidential project. We need you to put something together. You pulled together this amazing music video of Emily Blue that people can see, you know, through your social channels, I would think. But talk to me about how you've worked in the Z6 into your workflow and some of the differences from back then with D300S to now, some of the advantages that you may have.
Yeah, the Z6 is incredible. I haven't picked up, you know, my DSLRs because I've just been so eager to figure out what this thing can do, because it can do so much. So for me, something that I've been trying to do is work in different multimedia formats and bringing time-lapse into my filmmaking, and just trying to be as creative as I can, because I'm a photographer. I'm a filmmaker. You know, I like that time-lapse can kind of be the in-between. You kind of have to use, you know, both skill sets to create a really great time-lapse. I think that might be the next video I want to show.
It will. Before we get to that, talk to me a little bit about, you said it's great. Listen,
Yeah.
I thank you for saying that, Nikon. Really dig into what about the Z series cameras, Z6 or Z7, that stood out when you first started working with it? Because you're talking about a different technology and possibly a different approach, but some really tangible video features that we introduced into Z6 and Z7.
Yeah, I mean, right away it just had the elements that filmmakers need, like highlight display, focus peaking, you know, autofocus. Can we just take a moment to acknowledge that autofocus is blowing me away, and I think it's blowing a lot of people away.
One of the significant changes from our DSLRs to the mirrorless is how the focus tracks subject tracking.
Yeah, and you know, one thing that I really like is that you guys are updating firmware and making the camera better without having to change the body itself. And some updates that are coming for filmmakers in May.
Which we can say, I mean, and I've asked others this, I mean, how important is it to have Apple ProRes RAW as an option for you as a filmmaker?
It's massive. It's massive. I mean, when we were able to go 10-bit into the Atomos recorder, so if you go into the card, you're going to get a great 8-bit image. But if you go HDMI out into an external recorder, you're going to get 10-bit. You're going to get millions more colors.
Right.
And you're getting more information, less compression. You're pumping out a great file. So for me, I've just been working at what I would consider a more professional level and competing with a lot of cinema cameras out there, and not needing to change systems because it's all here.
Right.
And it's really helped me grow my chops, learn how the industry is working, and have the tools that I need to expose my image right. And it's just been a blast.
So now let me take you back into, you're mentioning time-lapse. You have a clip that shows behind the scenes. Is this a time-lapse piece that you created?
This is just a little bit of some more fun footage that I've been shooting with the Z6 that has really been new for me, but I've really enjoyed it. I think everyone would enjoy seeing some more footage from it.
Let her go.
Here we go. I've just been trying to find different ways to also capture behind the scenes of our shoots. One solution to that is just put it on a slider and do a time lapse and capture how our crew's working. And I think actually the industry is going more toward education and visually showing how professionals are working and doing their thing. And so I would highly encourage you to try out the 4K time-lapse that builds within the camera, or try doing the 8K time-lapse, which I believe our speaker after me is got a great presentation.
Mark Kettenhoffen's going to come up next. So again, you don't want to miss this program either with Mark. But I know you like going back into camera features. You mentioned to me user settings.
Yes.
Talk about the user settings a little bit.
Yeah, actually, it's one of the biggest things that I really like about the Z. So you have user 1, 2, and 3. So if you're shooting a documentary, you're flying real quick, you got to change your camera settings all the time. So the way I set it up is user 1, it's my standard 4K, 24 frames a second. This is my standard where I'm going to shoot when I pick up the camera. User 2 is my slow motion, right? The golden rule is you need to double your frame rate to the frames per second that you're shooting, right?
So you're plugging all these camera settings in, and you just save them in the user group.
And you save it.
Right.
So that's going to save you a lot of time. And then user 3, this is when I'm just doing my stills.
Right.
You know? So it has different layouts that allow you to quickly get to where you're going. Also, the I menu on the back has been great because you can customize the little tiles.
Right.
And you can let's just say, you know, focus peaking is maybe a feature you use more often.
Right.
And you want to see that on the back. You want to get to that quick. Focus points for shooting photography. And it just pops up and it tells you what it's all set at. So you can quickly confirm your settings are proper.
It's so funny because I mean, I'm kind of grinning and smiling because I think of the world in still because I'm just a still shooter. But to consider those custom groups for exactly what you just said, because you really don't want to be fumbling with menus, and the quicker path to getting to something in a setting would be pretty amazing. So
yeah, absolutely.
We talked a little bit about this, but what is your favorite feature on a Z6 if you had one? And I'm not trying to pimp the camera here. I mean, you know,
I do have one, Mike.
You do.
It's slow motion, my man.
I knew you do.
In fact, I have a clip. Here's the deal. Everything looks better in slow motion. Everything. I put a little clip together of the slow motion.
I noticed that in some of the work you've shown already. So
yeah, but to the point, I like to use as many different options in medium formats as possible. So when I'm making a film, I'm gonna have 24 frames. I'm gonna have slow motion. I'm gonna have time lapse.
Right.
I'm using the same camera. I'm just changing the settings.
I love
and I'm getting completely different looks. So here's another look that I've been getting with the Z6.
So that's pretty amazing.
I love the slow motion. Like I said, I think everything looks better in slow motion. If you're trying to, you know, if you're a photographer and you want to get into video, most DSLRs, mirrorless have video features. That's where I like to start. Slow motion, have fun, get really hooked on filming. That's a good first way to get it done.
So where do we go from here?
Where do we go from here? I mean,
you've got another clip coming up, War and Peace.
Yeah, the
Talk
War and
about
Peace.
that.
Here's the thing. My big quest lately is how do I pull out the highest quality look?
Right.
How do I maximize this camera and the colors? So I mentioned it before. With me and my crew, we go HDMI out into the Atomos recorders.
Right.
That enables us to record 10-bit to the recorder in a log format. I've recently partnered with a gentleman named Steve Atkins, who's an amazing colorist. He's done some great stuff in Hollywood. And I partnered with him to kind of learn more about how to use the Nikon-specific log formats.
Right.
And soon we're going to be going into the ProRes RAW stuff, which I'm really excited about. So I just lined up someone who was really great, knowledgeable about that. And so this isn't his work, but his work is part of my Joe McNally clip at the very end. But I wanted to show something that I'm just going to talk over, if that's okay.
Sure.
Here's a clear example of what in log, shoot, uncolored, and then the colored version of it. And for me, it's a great tool to just have a flexibility in coloring your footage without degrading your footage. Okay, it makes a massive difference at the end of the day. And again, I can't wait to see what the RAW format's going to unlock for us. But moving on.
And just for those that are tuning in that may not have as much experience as those looking at the broadcast that have a background in filmmaking, that flatter profile is something you prefer, no?
Well, the flatter profile allows us different things. For example, the camera, when you're shooting in a log format, the native ISO is at 800. So when you go to the external recorder, it's automatically going to set your camera at ISO 800. That's the sweet spot for your camera sensor. It's going to give you the most dynamic range, which means it's going to allow you to recall, or it's going to hold as much data as it can in the highlights and as much data as it can in the shadows. Okay, so when you go to color your footage, you have the most dynamic range to pull from, similar to a RAW photograph versus a JPEG.
Photo, right.
So it's flat, but with the Atomos recorder, you can put what's called LUTs on it to preview what it would look like.
Lookup tables.
Lookup tables. So what it would look like if it were applied, but it will still record in that flat format. So you're not stuck with only previewing that when you film.
Right.
It's just
it's
that
giving
is the
you the
format.
visual and the confidence to know that's where you can go.
Absolutely, yeah.
Talk to me about some of the other tips and tricks you may have learned, you know, working with Z6.
Yeah, you know, one thing that we've been using is the Nikon Z6 Filmmaker Kit.
Right.
One big thing is just rigging. You know, how do you rig your cameras? The first thing is fluid head tripod would be preferred. If you're looking to jump into filmmaking, you should really get a fluid head tripod and kind of start thinking a little more about how filmmakers use the equipment. I think that's a great starting point.
Right.
The Filmmaker kit is a really, really excellent first step as well, because it comes with the Atomos recorder.
Right.
It comes with the gimbal, and it unlocks all of those things. Not to mention, if you buy the Filmmakers kit, it comes with my class for free that I created, which is the Nikon School,
right.
The Art of Filmmaking with Nikon cameras. Small little plug there for that. But
listen, education's so important in this, and there's at times I feel intimidated, so it's nice to have some good learning.
There's a lot to know. There's a lot to, especially if you're a photographer and you're trying to figure out how does this apply into the video world. And I've had a personal kind of call to people who want to get into filmmaking. So that's why we created that class. And it starts off very small. And it goes and helps you build your production and build your confidence in your filmmaking. So that's a great class. I would check it out. And yeah.
And I don't want to run out of time. We're going to keep talking. We got a good solid 8 or so minutes left. I know we want to get to that one final clip of Joe.
Me too.
But talk to us a little bit about some of the ways, the easiest ways to begin filmmaking.
Right.
Start out as a filmmaker.
Yeah, I think everyone's very intimidated. Where do I start? For me, I'm a musician, and I heard a statistic that like 1 out of 4 Americans can say at the end of their lives that they played in a band. That's a lot of musicians. Music is just one of the easiest things to capture.
So I've got a shot.
You've got some kind of shot. I know you got a thing for drummers. Do you play drums?
Yeah, I did. And you guys should know this. This is the truth. I asked you once to teach me drums. You said, go buy a drum kit first.
Yeah,
that would be helpful.
I grew up playing on books, so if yeah,
I'll do that.
We'll figure it out. But I think just find a musician. Find someone who can sing or play piano, play guitar. Set the camera up on a tripod and practice your exposure. Practice lighting it. Hit start. Don't touch the camera. Don't move it. And just capture one piece from beginning to end. It doesn't have to be this big Hollywood film to be considered a video. And that's a big passion of mine, is just get people pushed down the road and get started. One camera, get it shot. Add a second camera. Don't touch them. Don't move them. Practice editing those two, syncing them to video.
Right.
But music is a great place to start. That's what I prefer.
And then you like that kind of vibe, that kind of action. But that can apply to just about any type of video or subject that you want to work in.
Pick the thing you love.
I was going to say, your passion for filmmaking drove you into places, and I love that notion of picking the thing you love because you'll know about it.
Yeah.
Anticipation is everything. We talk about that a lot in sports photography, and I can imagine you having a musical background made you a better cinematographer for videos and music and things like that. But
yeah.
Do you have any other clips before we get to the Joe clip?
I don't believe so.
So you want to try to run the Joe clip?
I do. I wanted to.
This could be potluck. If there's something in there, we're going to see it.
Yeah,
so
we'll see.
I want to get through that because I want to talk more about that project.
Yeah. So just to sum up what I'm about to show you, it's at CES, we stayed in town and we began filming a journey of basically documenting Joe McNally, who worked for Life magazine as a staff photographer for 20 years, National Geographic. This man has traveled the world. He's a photojournalist, but he also has that creative, I want to do something big and weird and out there, and he runs for it.
Yep.
And I was commissioned to capture that process, and I'm really happy to show everybody one of the 5 episodes that we're creating on this follow-along series of Joe teaching us how he does what he does. So this is a breakdancer named Kevin Rivera.
Right.
And we did a photo walk from the Bronx onto the train to Times Square and back, and this is just a bit of it. So I'm going to show it, and then we'll come and talk more about it, okay?
I'm with you.
Here we go.
It's a cold day in the Bronx. I don't know. Man, we've been shooting this job in various places and we have run into cold weather. But thankfully, Kevin Rivera, who's a wonderful breakdancer we're photographing today, lives in the Bronx and is used to it, right? Born and raised in New York City. Great subject. We're going to jump on the subway. I'm going to be shooting the Z6 at high ISOs, going to stay light and fast, and track him down where he oftentimes performs downstairs in the subway where people, you know, will just be flying by. Working with the brand new 24-70 2.8 S lens, and it's phenomenally sharp. First day I'm shooting it, and I'm already in love with it. At the end of the day, the end of the light, you know, gets a little hard to find, but it's when you do find it, it's really, really nice at this point in the day. 1, 2, 3. Nice. We did Z7, more set pieces, high resolution, lower ISO. So we used a whole variety of S lenses, especially concentrating on the new 24-70 f2.8. The Z6 was a perfect match for the day we had. I think I went in various situations today from ISO 200 to ISO 12,800. Anything the light can throw at you, the camera can handle.
Yeah. So you got to feel good about that.
I love seeing that, yeah. I love that we're here getting to show, I mean, something that we were working on just a few days ago.
This is the first time anybody's seen that?
This is the first time anyone has seen that.
So a world debut here at the NAB show. Another one.
Yeah.
This is great. This has been fantastic. And as we close down, when you're setting up for a shoot like that, what's going on in your mind? How do you prepare to get that done? I know you shot in Las Vegas.
Yeah.
We brought you to the Consumer Electronics Show, as you said. Then you moved over to the Bronx, so you shot in both locations. Yeah. When you're heading over to the Bronx, coming from home, how do you prepare for that kind of trip?
You prepare for the man who he's going to make a call that you better be prepared for.
Right.
So it's about preparing your gear.
Right.
It's about preparing your crew and being prepared as a filmmaker to capture whatever happens. And man, you cannot deal with dead batteries, full cards. You got to be prepared. You have to be organized.
Extra batteries and the right stuff, right?
Yeah, and just working on the camera. You know, I can't go in with a giant rig on a subway and be discreet. You need to. So for me, it was about refining our process. How do we get a film crew? Several cameras out.
Small footprint. We've talked a lot about that.
Yeah, and again, I didn't know. Like at the beginning of the day, the call sheet said we were going to be inside in the Bronx. We went inside for about 10 minutes, and then we walked through the Bronx.
And then you have to deal with the unpredictability of Joe to say, let's get out of here and do something else. Or?
But if you weren't prepared, to follow the story,
right,
you'd be shooting yourself in the foot. So the fact that the camera can be rigged with the Atomos monitor and extra battery life, you can run that camera for hours and not stop. That's unbelievable, and that's why I love that we can do documentaries as well as we do now. It's changed my game. It's allowed me to do what I love to capture even more.
Right.
And I've never been able to work so efficiently, and I love that I just use the same camera that I've been looking around for years. You know what I mean?
Well, and you know, we go back to the Chicago Music Exchange when you ran into Andrew Rubinstein way back when, several years ago, and watching you grow over the last several years, I'm so excited to see that the work you're doing now has taken you to another level, going from music videos to more commercial work and documentary work. I've watched you blossom into a great filmmaker. So I'm really proud to have you as part of the Nikon Ambassador team. I hope I'm not drilling too much.
No.
Thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
This is a great piece. Again, if you missed any part of this, you can see it on Nikon Live or Nikon's YouTube page. We got one more live broadcast coming up that you do not want to miss. We have Nikon's own Mark Kettenhoffen. He's a pro rep, but put that aside, he's one of the best still photographers, filmmakers, and he's worked on a time-lapse project that is going to knock you out of your socks. We're going to take a 15-minute break. We'll come back for that one more segment. We'll see you soon.
My dude.
excited about the possibilities that come from having high-quality video images, advanced tools that make filmmaking easier, in a lightweight package that still manages to be robust enough for even the most demanding shooting scenarios.
Hey, how was your morning?
Fine.
I'm Chris Hershman, filmmaker and photographer, and today we're filming a music video for an artist named Emily Blue. We're here in the wonderful Fort Knox hangar, and we are filming with a Nikon Z7 mirrorless camera. Great. How do you want to focus the camera?
So we're going to use autofocus on it, like we were doing yesterday.
Yeah.
I think the face detection on it was pretty pristine.
Yeah.
So I don't even think we have to attach anything to it. I mean, it's like
it worked really well yesterday.
Yeah. I mean, we have that follow focus, but we're just going to leave it behind for this show.
Yeah, great. Sounds good. I want to say 90% of what we filmed was just autofocus. So the fact that you can put the camera in places you can't reach and still use autofocus, I think that's a huge game changer for this camera. On this particular setup, we wanted to do a zooming effect, so we're using the 70-200, and what's great is we can use our F-mounted lenses with the adapter onto our mirrorless camera. We have all of these lenses that we can still use, and it works seamlessly with the autofocus. We're actually using a servo to zoom in and out, and we're letting the camera do all of the focusing, and it's been working great, and it keeps it tack sharp. It made a very complicated move much, much easier.
Hey, Stacy, are you still at the party? I'm trying to hit.
I like to have an on-set editor and we're basically taking the footage from the card after every big setup that we do. That's what Nick's doing right now. He's putting together a small edit of everything we shot yesterday, and we're bringing it back here to back it up immediately, and then we start cutting it together. That way, if we have what we need and we're in a crunch for time, we can just move on to the next setup after we've seen a little bit of it cut together. All right, so last thoughts on this thing. I think this is gonna change the game for filmmakers. I think it changed the game for me on this set. I've seen this camera do things that other Nikons have never done before for filmmaking. I can't wait for people to get their hands on this and experience just how powerful of a camera this is. I think people are absolutely gonna love this as a tool.
My name is Conor McDonald. I'm from Liverpool, England, and I am an entertainment and wildlife photographer. I've gone from photographing in small clubs and pubs in Liverpool to traveling the world. In the last year, I've switched to Nikon, and that was purely based on not just the photo qualities, but the video qualities as well, and how easy it is to switch in between both of them, because in my job, it's so run and gun, I have to constantly change between the two. I've seen a lot of creators come to Dubai, and I wanted to come and test out the Z6 here. There's been so many different shooting scenarios in Dubai. I've been shooting in small seaplanes, hot air balloons, in the desert, a live performance. Without the Z6, it just wouldn't have been possible. The Z6's autofocus has been really good at tracking cars, wildlife, performers on stage, and I haven't missed a single shot. The Z6's ability of shooting in low light has really impressed me. On this shoot, I haven't used a single external light, and I wouldn't have been able to do that without the Z6. And it won't just help me, but it'll help anyone that shoots video solo. Features that I'd normally expect on a much bigger camera, like being able to shoot full HD, 120p, slow motion, being able to get very cinematic looking shots. When I use an external recorder on a Z6, I can shoot 10-bit N-Log. Having N-Log footage means that when it comes to post, I can bring out all the details, be it clouds in the sky, you know, reflections in the buildings, so I can get the look exactly as I want when it comes to the grade. Using the NIKKOR Z lenses from when I've been using autofocus on them, it's been amazing to see that there's absolutely no breathing whatsoever. The mount adapter has allowed me to use all my f-mount lenses as well, which has been amazing, and all my long zoom lenses for the wildlife, and it gives me all the access to all the tools I use on a day-to-day basis. Having used the Z6 in Dubai and seeing what it can do, I'm really excited to use it on my next job.
I hate when it tucks over. It looks like fat rolling over, but it's really not. Welcome back to the Nikon Studio. My name is Mike Corrado. I have been hosting a number of programs over the last 2 days, and this is the last one for day 2, and to close out our live broadcast for NAB 2019. And I couldn't think of a better way to close this out with something so inspiring entitled Earth, Wind, and Inspire, and a project that was created internal, and we turned to one of our internal people who's very talented, Mark Kettenhoffen, to work with 50 NIKKOR lenses and one Z7 camera, and the task was to create an 8K video. So let me welcome to the show, Nikon Live Show, Mr. Mark Kettenhoffen.
Thanks, sir.
Mark and I have worked together for decades now, right? And we met each other a long time ago at a military facility, Dinfos, while you were an educator at the time, and I was coming in to educate you and some of the other personnel at your shop. So talk to us a little bit about your career and what got you into filmmaking, photography and filmmaking.
Okay. I've been a photographer for about 40 years now. Started out as a still photographer, I went to Syracuse for photojournalism. From there, I started to expand from there into video and kind of expanded my range of how I see things, how I look at things, and how I like to capture moments in life.
Right. And so that video passion came to life through photography, through still photography? It's just you wanted to take that next step?
Exactly. Still photography is my first love. But the thing I love about moving picture or video is it gives several different elements, not only just the still picture, but also the audio and the light and the movement of that. And all of that combined together kind of expands the ability to tell a story.
And you love that storytelling aspect of it all.
Absolutely.
I know you've got a sizzle reel, so why don't we start this off by letting people see a bit of your vision?
Okay. There we go.
That is nothing short of stunning.
Thank you.
And I've seen your work before, and I know that you are a true artist. But the versatility in that piece just screams out. You know, it's eye candy, and you have that great passion, and you can see that in the work that you do. You get a call a couple of months ago, maybe more than a couple of months ago, and yet again, Bill Giordano and our marketing team comes up with this idea about how to showcase NIKKOR lenses. But at the same time, one of the big things we've been working with is 8K time lapse, and being able to produce 8K time lapse since the D850 camera. And you were tasked to do what?
They called me into the office and they said, we have this camera that's coming, and we have this idea of shooting a large number of NIKKOR lenses, and we want to create an 8K time lapse with this camera in combination with these lenses to show the versatility of the NIKKOR lineup. And from there, it just blossomed.
For anybody out there that doesn't really understand the whole depth of time-lapse, what is time-lapse photography?
Time-lapse is basically, in a nutshell, a sequence of images put together, and then to show a slow-moving, maybe clouds or water, and then in a post-production mode, you then speed it up in the creation process.
And so when you're thinking this out, there's obviously got to be a bit of planning.
There is.
Especially in a project of this magnitude, because there's no sugarcoating this. This is one heck of a task. And I know we had a little bit of help from Chris from the Canada team.
Yes, we did.
On some of this.
Chris made some amazing images that were included in the piece as well.
And so you have 50 lenses to think about. Where does your brain start? I mean, how do you even conceive one lens to the next, and all of a sudden, 48 lenses later, you have to have this project complete?
Probably the biggest challenge, most time lapses lend themselves to a wider angle lens. That's what you normally see. So the challenge was not only from the wide angle lens, but the telephoto lens. I shot all the way up to an 800 millimeter. So that became a challenge. So a lot of the forethought went into, all right, in this location, I want to use these particular lenses. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. Being flexible was very important.
So I just want to mention, too, the pictures in the background that are running through. Talk about those a little bit.
Yep. So the pictures that are showing in the background right now, each one of them is a still image pulled out of the time-lapse. And each one represents a different part of the time-lapse from where I was. I shot in 4 different states, Colorado, Oregon, and Washington State, and Utah.
I looked at the statistics, which I hope we get to at the end of this, because there's some pretty heavy numbers about what we've done. But now, again, take me back to, all right, you've got the assignment. Your vision starts to work in the creative brain. Now you have to map out where you're going and what you're doing. So within those states, how do you know where to go first? How do you get yourself prepared to do something of this magnitude?
One of the benefits of what I do for Nikon is my territory involves the states I went to.
Yeah, it's not exactly the shabbiest territory, is it?
It's not. I have a lot of friends that really
Your
don't like it.
Your backyard is?
Colorado. I live up in the Rockies.
Not so bad.
Not so bad.
Long Island's not bad either. Long Islanders, I love you, but it's not exactly as open and beautiful as Colorado or the areas that you've gone to.
Exactly. So before I even started the project, I had been to several of the locations. And a lot of times as a photographer, you go there and you might take one single image, but it you catalog that location for maybe a future project, which is actually what I did for a lot of the locations.
So where'd you start? What state did you start in?
I started in Washington. I worked in Mount Rainier National Park, Olympic National Park, and then I moved my way from there down along the Oregon coast. I was out there for almost 3 weeks.
3 weeks? Away from home.
Away from my wife, Veronica, who supported me through the whole thing.
Yeah, support groups are very good in these situations. But so outside of the preparation of the map of the travel that you're going to take, what do you do to start preparing the gear itself?
Well, for this project, it involved a lot of getting to the location. And for a lot of these locations, there was no hotel. It was I had to camp in most of the locations. Well over 3/4 of the location I was camping. So thankfully I had a lot of preparation prior to that. My garage looks like a outdoor store and a Nikon store combined together, just exploded.
And that's a part of your background though, from military, learning survival skills, being out there camping a lot. That's what you love anyway,
I'm comfortable in outdoors.
And we paid you to do this, right?
Yeah. It's a terrible thing.
It's a horrible job. But no, so you prepare yourself not only for the photography part, but your survival and sleeping overnight, camping, things like that.
It is. I mean, a lot of the locations in the national parks, a lot of those camps have facilities, but there were some locations, especially in the desert in southern Utah. I went into Bears Ears Monument, which is very isolated, no support whatsoever. I did one solo hike in there over a period of 2 days, 23 miles. Required me carrying my own water, GPS units, knowing exactly where springs were to get my water.
Right.
On top of carrying the cameras.
What was some of the other essentials for being in that kind of environment that you had to bring out?
Biggest thing that first of all, letting people know where I was. If anyone is gonna attempt this, your safety is paramount. But then just preparing myself so that I could dedicate my creative side to making the images without really worrying about my safety.
And by the way, we have a confidence monitor here. I'm seeing these images that were pulled from the time lapse that we're going to world debut here today, right? Nobody's seen the final cut. And I've actually purposely not looked at this cut because I wanted to see what you came up with. Sadly, I looked at the wall that we're running the 8K video on, and I saw snippets of it, and I had to close my eyes because I did not want to see this whole piece. There's some beautiful stuff in here.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, so you get yourself prepared, you start to map things out, you look at all the survival things that you'll need for being on the road to be comfortable, and now you have to start thinking about the gear and packing the gear and setting it all up. I mean, 50 NIKKOR lenses, what are you doing, putting them in one bag and carrying them with you? Or,
Organization,
I mean, how are you prepping the gear?
Organization was the key.
Right.
I had bags that had all the lenses lined out. Each one of the lenses was labeled, and then I had a sheet that I marked, and I marked which lens I had shot, which one I needed to shoot, and then I would write next to that where that location would be, where I thought that lens might lend itself.
Right.
Very specific.
So you had an idea of what you may shoot where?
I did.
But did you get to a location and say, that's not going to work, and shift gears quite a bit? Or?
It did. It happened several times. One of the locations, Mother Nature was probably, she's a fickle mistress. Mm-hmm. She doesn't always give you what you want. I was trying to shoot in Rainier, a shot that I was hoping to get last year, and unfortunately we had some really bad wildfires last year in that area, and the visibility of Mount Rainier went down to less than half a mile, and it basically just kind of scrubbed the whole shoot for me, and I had to move on from there.
So let's talk a little bit about the camera itself in time-lapse. Now, if anyone studied the Nikon Z system or other Nikon cameras, there are two features that essentially allow you to do time-lapse. One of them is a built-in 4K, but that's not what you use, right? Because that builds its own movie and it does it at 4K, and that's not what we were looking for here. But talk about that feature a little bit.
Well, the internal feature where you can make the 4K movie, it does a wonderful job. But what we were looking for was the highest resolution that we could get out of the camera while at the same time showcasing the NIKKOR glass. So basically, a 4K and 8K I refer to as UHD, or ultra high definition. A 4K, the longest dimension is 4096, and that's the longest dimension. And 8K is 7680, which is essentially twice a 4K.
Right.
So in order to accomplish that, we had to actually shoot single individual images. What's interesting, though, is that the Z7 creates a file that's higher than 8K. The longest dimension of the JPEG or RAW file is 8256 coming out of the camera.
Right.
So then what we did is then we used post-production to actually set it to 8K. In addition to that, there's a great feature in this camera for people that are doing stuff like this, that you can set the image area to 16:9 or anamorphic.
Right.
So then when you scale it in post, it's automatic.
So that's perfect for the types of formats that we're running today. And so in this project, where a guy like me, I'm not into the post-production part of all this. So I did a time-lapse at a Mets game, a playoff game against Chicago, ran an entire time-lapse of the entire game, but I did that with a D750 where it built the movie in camera. That's not what you're doing here. You're relying on the resolution of the Z7. I kind of want to make that clear to everybody tuning in, that this is not a built-in feature of the camera. It's the high-res capability of the camera that allows us to create the 8K output.
Exactly, exactly. So what I would do is I would actually start with the scene that I was going to shoot, and almost every single one, as a matter of fact, every single one of the images or the series, I shot at least 300 images, which when I was shooting at any location, I knew that the final movie was going to be 30 frames per second.
Right.
So if you do the math, 300 images at 30 frames per second gives me at least 10 seconds of video.
You mean there's a lot of math involved in this? Because I'd be out.
I'm terrible at math. That's about as much as I know about it.
I'll just appreciate the work that you do, and I'll live vicariously through your travels, because Lord knows if we asked you to do this on Long Island, you know, maybe you can produce something in 8K there. But But that's great. And so let's dig in a little bit to the intervalometer feature and the settings of the Z7. What are you doing to get the best picture? Now, I know this camera was an early stage camera, so we asked you to do something very confidentially. We know at that time, as cameras revolve or evolve and come out, we don't have all the capabilities of RAW files, so you actually shot most of this in JPEG, in the JPEG format.
I did. I shot.
Which is a bit of a handicap if you think about it, because you can't do a lot of the same posts you would do in a RAW file at the end of all this.
In a normal process, I would say that, but for time-lapse, you almost always are going to shoot in a manual mode and set all the camera to manual settings. But the camera just performed amazingly, and what really helped me out that I'd like to point is that the electronic viewfinder, you can set it to actually see what the changes you make in the viewfinder.
Right, that's a big advantage for any photography, right?
Yep, exactly. So
or video for that fact.
Even though, you know, in a normal case that you might be working with a RAW file, the files that were coming out of the camera were just so spot on, there was no concern.
So what other settings did you work with? Did you change picture control? Did you work with some of the settings? How did you create some of the vibrancy? Because what I did see so far, again, is just stunning, and it pops. It just really pops.
That's where you kind of fall back on your movie making, your video techniques, because you really have to know what you're going to look at in the future. So in video, you're going to want normally a very flat profile. Like in our cameras, we've got the new N-Log, the Nikon Log, which essentially what that does is it holds your shadows and it holds your highlights without losing either one, and it kind of flattens all the colors. And then what you do in post is you're able to match all the colors. Because I was shooting still images, what I did is I shot everything in a flat color profile. And then when I brought it into my post-production, I was able to match all the colors while holding shadow detail and not allowing my highlights to blow out.
Right.
Which is what you want to do when you're creating video.
And one of the advantages of shooting the still, you're shooting a high res, right? As high res as the camera can create. So not only do you have the components to make the time lapse, but you still have the still images that you can print at enormous sizes.
Exactly, and that's what we're looking at right now. Each one of these is a full res file right out of the camera.
And that's just a philosophy of how you want to do this. If you want to deal and can deal with the post-production end and put in that effort and all that work, then you have that benefit of the raw file. Someone like me who takes the short way, the shortcut, and builds the movie in the camera, lets the camera do all that work for time-lapse, I don't have the benefit of really pulling that high-res image out.
Exactly, exactly. And then when you're building the piece like this, one of the things that I do like to point out when you actually see it, you'll see some camera movement in the video. And because we were creating an 8K format video, we didn't want to degrade the image in any way. And if you use a post-production and you actually move within the image in post-production, it's less than 8K.
Right.
So all the movements that you see in this video were actually, I used two different sliders, one slider from Benro, another one from Elechrome. And I physically moved the camera within the scene to maintain that high 8K format.
And the movement is also going to add a dynamic of a visual pleasure.
It adds a dynamic to the visuals, and one of the questions I get is how do you choose when you move a camera? Basically how I looked at it is if there was movement in the scene, such as clouds, water, or even light, I normally let the scene speak for itself.
Right.
But if there's a scene in there where there isn't really necessarily any clouds moving, water moving,
right,
that's when I applied the physical movement to the camera to give it dynamics.
So teach me something here, and maybe I'll steal what you're teaching me and do this myself, but how do you start, you talked about math before, how do you start figuring out how you set the intervalometer? What's the interval timing? What's the length of time that you have to shoot? How long do you have to have that camera running to get 10 seconds worth of time lapse out of this? Talk a little bit about your settings there.
The general rule of thumb when you're doing time lapse, the slower the movement, the longer the interval can be, such as clouds, slow moving clouds. General rule of thumb is 15 seconds in between each picture, which is called the interval. However, because we wanted to have the smoothest look in the final product of the movie, everything I shot was at the least window for interval.
Right.
Almost everything was shot at a half a second interval. So when you see the actual movie, there is no gaps in between the clouds moving or water moving. which then creates a much smoother look in the video. The downside to that is when you have something that's moving very slow, such as a sunrise, your frames, instead of 300 images, end up being 3,000 images to actually record the whole sunrise. And then you have to take those 3,000 images at the end, and then in post, shrink it down, increase the speed of that upwards of about 300 to 400%, but then it looks smooth. There's no jump in the video.
So post-production becomes a big part of this for you.
I spent almost 150 hours on post-production.
Another one of those statistics I want to talk about at the end. Now, how long is this piece that you created?
It's almost 4 minutes.
So what I'd love to do now is let's get to it. Let's world debut this now for everybody tuning in here at NAB. I want to see this, and let's come back and talk about it.
Okay. All right. Well, go ahead and start it. Come on. I'm pushing the button.
We'll get this going. We'll get it going. Hold on, people. I know we're just creating anticipation here is what we're doing. We want to draw you in hanging at the edge of your seats.
There it goes.
So I'm speechless, but I know you well enough to know that I'm not at all surprised at what you put together here.
Thank you.
Seeing it live here now after all of the work that you put into this, because you shot it, you created everything, you did the post-production, you got the help of Chris from Canada for some of the scenes and some of the lenses. What are your thoughts seeing it right now in its totality?
I think back to the challenges. I ended up hiking almost 400 miles, about 385 miles, drove close to 6,000. Highest temperature I recorded in was 98 degrees. The lowest was -14.
I'm checking your stats here because I've got all the statistics. How many miles did you drive?
Almost 6,000.
Well, 5,675 miles driven.
Yep.
How many months of shooting?
7 months.
And you know there's still another 50 NIKKOR lenses to go.
That's what I hear. That's what I hear.
So we're just getting started here. How many major snowstorms did you hit?
I got hit by 3 major snowstorms. Every one of them was in Colorado. I love the state, but sometimes she beats me to death.
You mentioned the highest temperature. Did you say the lowest temperature?
-14.
What are you, nuts?
The camera didn't even. The camera was better than I was.
Can't even handle
at that.
32 degrees, let alone -14. How many miles did you hike?
385, I believe it was. And I'd say at least half of that was carrying a backpack that weighed between 40 and 50 pounds.
So you get this gig, you get a lot of exercise in, a lot of hiking in, all these beautiful locations, and we paid you to do this. All right, let's get away from that. How many nights did you spend in a hotel versus camping?
12 nights. I suffered. I suffered that, and 45 plus nights in camping. I had 3 bears visit me, black bears, thankfully. My highest or the lowest elevation was at Bandon Beach in Oregon, obviously sea level.
Right.
Highest was in White River National Forest in Colorado at 12,700 feet.
All right, so those are some of the cool statistics. Let's talk about things like the number of total images in this movie to create this time.
Almost 3,000, so it's 28,150.
I was going to ask if you knew the exact number. And the amount of project data on 5 hard drives was?
8.3 terabytes. So if you want to do time-lapse, this is the stuff you have to, it's a lot of data.
I love this. You got 3 black bear sightings. You photographed in 4 states, which you mentioned before. You only lost 2 XQD cards. Hopefully there was nothing on them.
Empty XQD. Those are the best kind to lose.
Someone stole your hiking boots?
I can't figure that one out. I hope if you're out there and they fit you well, enjoy.
I'm going to run down a list of these places. The whole rainforest in Olympics National Park. The Queets, is that?
Queets Rainforest.
In Olympic, still an Olympic.
It's a UNESCO World Heritage Site.
Is it called Quinault?
Quinault.
Oh, yep. Wow. Paradise in Rainier National Park. Rocky Mountain National Park. Sunrise, Rainier National Park. Reflection Lake in Rainier. Some of the great, you got to look up all these places.
It's amazing.
Fisher Towers in Moab.
Yep.
Bear Ears National Monument. I mean, you've been to a ton of places here, and that's pretty phenomenal. And
it is.
I got to say, we live in a group of very passionate people at Nikon about photography and filmmaking, and it's always amazing to be inspired by our ambassadors and the people that we work with on the outside that do this for a living.
Every day.
This is a part of our living, and it just never goes away, does it? So we sacrifice a lot of time. And just to make it clear, these kind of projects don't come along that often.
They don't.
So I think you owe Bill a car or something, anything, because
at
of
least.
the idea. But this is the best way to close out this show. So I thank you for your time and your knowledge. I have learned something about time-lapse that I will probably apply. I don't get into the math, but I get into the imagery. And it's great to know some of the little things I can do to shape myself up here and trying to do time-lapse. You will do another 50 lenses, I'm sure of it. But I have to thank you guys for tuning in. I know we have a live audience here, too, so thank you guys for standing here. This has been an incredible 2 days because we've sat with some really epic filmmakers and photographers and ambassadors and Deanne Fitzmaurice and Chris Hershman. And we had Devin Supertramp here yesterday. His work is pretty epic. But please go online to Nikon Live or our YouTube page. You can see any one of these programs as many times as you want because we have posted them, including this one from Mark. Again, Mark, thank you for your time, your energy, your passion. I'm really inspired to go out into Vegas now and try and do some of this stuff tonight. So thank you for that and your knowledge. So thank you all for tuning in. We are closing out the live broadcast on this second day at NAB at the Nikon Studio. Again, remember, look up some of this MRMC technology of robotics and pods and automation that we've created, the Nikon Z series mirrorless cameras, and some of the other tools we have for filmmaking and photography. We thank you for sharing time with us, and we will see you next year.
Diameter is 55 millimeter. It provides the best balance of size and great image quality. For an FX format sensor,